Welcome back to Pocket Saga. Today we are going to see, what if Ash had glass bone and got banned from League? This is part 1 and do check out the author of this story named, Osteogenesis Imperfecta by Joshua Falcon. And make sure to leave a like, share and subscribe for more. Let's get in the video. Pokemon trainer Ash Ethan Ketchum, 13 years old, was in the CA.RE of Viridian City General Hospital this morning, after being found in his room at the Viridian Hotel, completely unconscious, by his traveling companion, Cerulean City Gym leader Misty Williams. The victim, from Pallet Town, was found with all his bones broken due to a brutal attack with an iron lever, found in the crime scene. According to Dr. Andrew Rupertson, Mr. Ketchum's state is critical. In agreement with the doctors, the effect of the violent attack was amplified due to osteogenesis imperfecta, a genetic disease that makes the bones very fragile. Detective Jennifer Wigand, in an official statement to waiting reporters, said that the security police have yet to have any leads regarding this incident. According to sources in the Pokemon Global League itself, it is suspected the trainer was attacked to prevent him from facing Amanda Blackstone, the current league champion, in a match scheduled to take place in a few weeks' time. Giovanni Carpenter, leader of the Viridian City Gym, of which trainer Blackstone is a member, had this comment: "That is an absurd supposition." Kimberly Steleon, the president of the Pokemon Global League, would only say that the league commissioners would wait the results of the SP investigations before taking any further action. There are rumors that many gym leaders want a pause in the games until the investigation has reached some manner of conclusion. The family and the trainer's friends were unavailable for comment at the time of press. Viridian City General Hospital, June 14, 2063. In room 814 of the Viridian City General Hospital, a woman and a Pikachu observed the boy in the bed, immobilized by means of plaster and various orthopedic devices. The only sound they could hear was the bleeping and wheezing of various machines attempting to keep the boy's shattered body alive. The only movement that the woman made was to scratch the head of the electric Pokemon, trying to comfort him. It was difficult, however, to offer comfort when she felt none herself. Delilah Catherine Ketchum jumped when she felt a heavy hand on her shoulder. "It's for you, Delilah." Professor Samuel Oak offered a cup of coffee kindly. She didn't hear him to enter. "Thank you, Sam." Quote. She turned her gaze back to Ash, sipping on the coffee. "Has he woken up yet?" Oak asked. The look of fear in the eyes of the small Pikachu answered the question without words. From the time he was hospitalized earlier that day, Ash had undergone 5 separate operations to stem the internal hemorrhaging and to attempt to repair his smashed skeleton. Until now, he had not recovered consciousness. Professor Oak and Delilah stood in silence. When Delilah couldn't take any more of the quiet, she suddenly stood up. "Where are Misty and Brock?" she asked. A little afraid, he answered. "Misty is still giving her statement to the security police." Delilah frowned. "Well, she found Ash, you know, and Brock is talking with the doctors." Delilah nodded sadly. Professor Oak observed her carefully. She seemed to be under control, in spite of the clear anguish in her face, but he knew her very well. He knew that she could break at any moment. The only time that he had seen her in that way had been when, "My God," she exploded and began to cry. "I can't believe it. Ash has gone so far, and now, this." The only thing that Samuel Oak could do was to try to console her, hugging her in a clumsy way. But he could not alleviate her torment. What she always feared was happening now. The nightmare that she had lived every day of her life for 13 years. Pallet Town Memorial Hospital, February 14, 2050. Delilah had shut her eyes, holding back the pain screams. "Push harder. One more time," the doctor encouraged. "He is coming." Delilah pushed and heard a strong cry. She smiled. Her son had been born. The cry got stronger, much stronger. Feeling that something was wrong, she opened her eyes. She saw that the nurse took her baby outside of the childbirth room quickly, and the doctor's astonished glance. But what scared her were her son's arms and legs. They hung of the body, as if they were. What happened? The only answer that she obtained of the doctor was a haunted glance. Later, she went into the nursery. And she saw her son, Ash, for the first time. In some ways, it was an impossible vision. His limbs were immobilized with plaster. The white of the eyes had a strange blue tone. The whole scene seemed surreal, making her heart wrench in her chest with pain and fear. She could see the pain in the son's eyes. "Mrs. Ketchum?" a short red-haired doctor asked. Delilah nodded mutely. "I'm Drive. Brenda Wiggins. I think we need to talk." 2 weeks later, Delilah brought Ash to his home, in the outskirts of Pallet Town. He slept in the cradle beside her bed, while she read the diagnosis for the 17th time. A strange, almost alien-looking name that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She began to sleep and the paper dropped in the ground. The light of the lamp illuminated a name: osteogenesis imperfecta. Osteogenesis imperfecta, a rare disease of the bones where collagen failed to lock into the required shape. It left its victims, of which Ash was one of less than 30 known in the whole world, with bones that were frequently awfully malformed and always dangerously brittle. Worse, there was no cure. It was a genetic disease. An error in the proteins and codes of the DNA. In most severe cases, like Ash, it is a terrifying curse without any hope, and without any escape. Delilah would spend the rest of her life fearing that it was, somehow, her fault. That she had done something wrong in those 9 long months that had condemned her son to life as a helpless cripple. The day was perfect. Delilah was playing with Ash in the Pallet Town Park. Both smiling, one for the another. "Ash, catch." She tossed a volleyball to him, that he caught easily. He began to run in her direction, when, suddenly, he fell. The sick sound of bones cracking could be clearly heard. She tried to move, but she was paralyzed. The sound continued, as the number of fractures increased, the bones shattering and punching out through his flesh. That sound began to compete with Ash's agonized screams. Delilah woke up, drenched in cold sweat. It was just a nightmare. She left her bed running, and she hugged her son, who slept peacefully in his bed. Pallet Town Pokemon Research Center, offices of Professor Samuel Oak. October 7, 2056. In the living room, 3 people were drinking coffee: a strong white-haired man, a tall red-haired woman, and a brown-haired woman, with very elegant clothes. The redhead had a tense expression, and was staring out of the window, not turning around for a second. "Calm down, Delilah. Ash will be okay." Her old friend, Professor Samuel Oak, said, smiling. She smiled, embarrassed. "I know, Sam. I just can't help it." He shook his head. What could happen with him playing with Gary and May? He can get Gary in trouble. Sarah Millicent Oak, daughter-in-law of Professor Oak, said. Sarah was visiting her father-in-law that day. Oak rolled his eyes, silently asking Delilah to forgive his son's wife. Sarah was the most arrogant person that he knew. He didn't understand how Kevin could have wanted to marry a woman like this. In that moment, a girl with long black hair, more or less 8 years old, entered in the room. Scared out of her wits. "Mommy, Grandpa, Mrs. Ketchum, May, what's going on?" her mother asked, angry for her daughter to be so hysterical when her mother was with other adults. Gary and Ash were talking about who could get a ball that was caught in a tree branch, over there, by the lake. May choked down a few sobs and began to wave her hands urgently. Gary dared Ash to climb in the tree. And he climbed and he got the ball. But then Ash slipped and fell. Now, he is screaming in pain. By the time May reached that part, Delilah and Professor Oak were already running in direction of the lake. Oak threw a Pokeball in the air. There was a red flash and a Meryl appeared. "Meryl, search for Ash. Now." The water-type tracking Pokemon took them directly to the place. Gary was wearing the biggest expression of idiocy in the world. He simply gazed in stunned amazement at the fallen boy in the base of the tree, with his legs distorted in an impossible angle. Impossible for anyone with leg bones still in one piece, that is. "Ash!" Delilah screamed, running towards her son. Oak drew another Pokeball, this one with the red cross symbol, and threw it forward. A Chansey healing Pokemon appeared and she went directly to the casualty, joining her trainer, Professor Oak himself. After a fast examination, Chansey verified that Ash had broken both legs below the knees and recommended immediate hospitalization. Oak called up his Kadabra, and he asked him to teleport Ash, Delilah and Chansey to the Pallet Town Memorial Hospital. The 4 of them disappeared in a blue-white flash. Professor Oak drew in a deep breath and looked at his grandson with a fierce expression. Gary looked up at him, still wearing an expression of utter idiocy and innocence, something that did not fool his grandfather one bit. I think you owe me an explanation, Gary. Pokémon Indigo Division Stadium, Viridian City. October 26, 2056. Trainer Sharpeler recalls his Venusaur and choose a Steelix. Will the rock Pokémon stand the heat of the flamethrower of Trainer Vonnegut's Charizard? The commentator asked the crowd, which cheered and urged the two Pokémon on. Go Steelix. Turn that stone to charcoal. Charizard. Delilah looked at her son, at her side, in the crowds. She smiled, when she saw the way that his eyes shone, not losing one moment of the Pokémon's movements. He had completely forgotten the crutches that he had to use, due to the accident at Professor Oak Laboratory. Indeed, it was Professor Oak who had given the tickets for the Pokémon League Indigo Division Finals. The stadium's loudspeakers relayed the orders of the trainers with perfect clarity. Charizard. Flamethrower. Maximum power. Steelix, dodge and burrow attack. Before there was a chance of the fire touching him, the rock Pokémon dug a hole in the middle of the arena floor. Before the Charizard had a chance to realize what was happening, it was knocked out as Steelix explode. Out of the ground directly underneath it. Bout and match, Sharpeler and Steelix. The umpire confirmed. Richard Sharpeler wins the 2056 Indigo Division Championship. That was the faster rock against fire fight I already saw. The commentator enthused. Later, Delilah and Ash went back home and Delilah had to run to keep up with him, so thrilled that he was. He spoke, when they stopped in front of the house. Now I know what I want to be. And what you want to be, Ash? With the eyes shining, he answered, a Pokémon Master. Although she smiled at Ash, inside Delilah's heart shriveled with fear. Pallet Town Central Police Station. March 18, 2058. I understand how you must feel about this misunderstanding, Mrs. Ketchum, but please understand that it is my duty to properly investigate this sort of accusation. Official Jenny Clancy said in an embarrassed and apologetic tone. I understand. Delilah Ketchum snapped. She turned and left the police station, without once looking back. She got into her car and started it. Still looking very upset look. Ash watched her carefully and, bless him, noticed her anger at once. Mom, is everything okay? Huh, oh, yes sure. She tried to smile, but she couldn't. She could not believe what had happened. Ash's teacher had, based on the injuries caused by a fall, accused Delilah of abusing him. How could that witch even think that she could do a thing like that to Ash? The oppressive silence continued while they proceeded home. Ash suddenly spoke up, sounding embarrassed and ashamed. Mom, I'm sorry. For what? She asked in surprise. For being this way. Delilah couldn't believe what she had just heard. What? She blurted. She saw the uncertainty in his blue and brown eyes. You got in trouble with the police because I hurt myself, Ash explained. I've caused you so much trouble, because I'm not, well, normal. Delilah started crying. She had to stop the car at once. As soon as they were stationary, she leaned over and hugged Ash as hard as she dared. Oh Ash, you don't have to apologize for being who you are. Remember this, you are the best thing that happened to me in my life. You're perfectly normal and why? Oh, you can be anything you set your mind to be. And whoever says that there are limits to what you can do is completely wrong. She looked at his eyes. Do you understand? I understand, Ash said, his usual sunny smile re-emerging. I love you Mom. Ketchum home. April 25, 2060. Pokémon Journey Application Parent Guardian Approval Form was the name of the document that she read. She just need sign it. And her son would receive his novice trainer's license and leave on his Pokémon journey in May 1st. For any mother, that was a difficult decision, but for Delilah Ketchum that was the most difficult decision of her life. She knew that the life of a Pokémon trainer was hard, very hard. She feared that Ash could not stand it, that he could be hurt so seriously that. In her head, images of W.H.N. Ash was born with his arms and legs broken and when he suffered the most extensive fractures in his body. Her every instinct screamed at her, saying, don't sign. Don't let him leave to be part of that madness. She got up off of the sofa in the living room and went to her son's bedroom. It was entirely filled with things about the Pokémon and the League. Ash slept, with a smile in his face and a book on his chest, History of the Pokémon League. This meant a lot for Ash and she knew that he dreamed about it every day. Since he saw the finals of the league when he was 6 years old, there had been a light in his eyes. And she remembered a chat that they had in the car in an afternoon of March of 2058. She lifted the pen and signed. In that night, a nightmare that she didn't have for 10 years came back. And one day, 3 years later, it finally came true. Viridian City General Hospital, June 14, 2063. I'm sorry, Sam, Delilah said, trying to restore her composure. She wiped the tears from her cheeks. Embarrassed by her reaction. It's all right. You had to blow off some of stress that you must be feeling. Pikachu tapped his trainer's mother's leg, trying to reassure her. Did you see? Even Pikachu thinks it was all right. She smiled, thankful at the electric mouse. Thank you. To you both. On that moment, Brock Harrison, the gym leader of Pewter City's Boulder Gym, entered in the room. Hello, Professor Oak. Hello, Mrs. Ketchum. Brock, hello. Have the doctors have any information yet? Actually. Brock was interrupted by a coming sound of the bed. Huh. Brock. Pika-Chu. Delilah. Brock and Pikachu ran to the bed, while Professor Oak called the ward nurse. Suddenly, everyone smiled. Ash Ketchum had recovered consciousness. Viridian City Central Police Station. Interview room. June 14, 2063. Misty hugged Togepi, while she waited in the room for the investigator that would take her statement. The door opened and a black-haired woman wearing a black coat entered. Misty did not know her. But there was something so familiar about her. Miss Williams, I'm Detective Jennifer Wigand. Now, Misty understood why the woman was so familiar, the difference that some details can make. I believe that we can begin your statement. The detective activated a MP10 recorder. Could you state your full name and age, please? Misty Elizabeth Williams, 15 years old. And you are leader of Cerulean City Gym. How long have you been the Pokémon Journey companion of trainer Ash Ketchum? The orange-haired girl thought a little. For at least 3 years. I've been with him since he destroyed my bicycle. The detective looked at her, surprised. Huh. Well, I think that I should explain that, she said in an embarrassed tone. I was fishing along the banks of the River Palette. When I pulled Ash and his Pikachu out of the water. They were escaping from Spearows that were attacking them. Because they were closing in, he took my bicycle to escape from the and to take Pikachu to the nearest Pokémon Center. Which Pokémon Center? Right here. The one in Viridian City. Mentally, the detective noted that she should interview Nurse Joy at the city's Pokémon Center. Right. Continue. Please. Well, to cut a long story short, Ash's Pikachu destroyed my bicycle when he threw an Thundershock attack to stop the Spearows. I've followed Ash since then, hoping that he will replace my bicycle. She ended, opening the arms. Jenny Wigand looked carefully at the trainer. Stay close by someone for 3 years just to ensure that they pay a debt. She didn't buy that story. She thought that there was something more involved. Something of romantic kind. What can you tell me about him? How you would describe him? That question caught the trainer by surprise. Well, he is the most stubborn, clumsy, awkward, lazy, braggart. She sighed before continuing. Who was she trying to fool? He is also courageous, honest, decent, determined, sometimes even heroic. He always gets us in trouble because he can't keep his mouth shut, but he also tries always help people as much as he can. He can be the laziest trainer in the world, but he also loves Pokémon more than any other trainer I know. The policewoman didn't interrupt her witness, but she gave a small smile all time that she changed her friend's description. One moment she criticizes him, but the next she praises him. It was a sign that Jenny knew very well. She had already suffered of that disease herself. Did you know if your friend had any enemy? Misty shook her head, in a vehement way. No, I can't think of anyone who would want to hurt Ash. I mean, Team Rocket pursues him. I'm sorry, the Team Rocket. That trainer was being pursued by the world's largest terrorist organization. By 2 of their field agents, Jesse and James. They want to steal Ash's Pikachu. As far as we can tell, it is because he is much more powerful than any other. I understand. She knew of Jesse and James. They were notorious, the region's most feared thieves of Pokémon. Continue, please. Well, I don't think they would do a thing like that. I mean, they have that reputation of being bad guys. But they are not the kind of people who would sow such a thing. Misty shook her head. Jenny didn't agree with that opinion, but didn't comment. Please, tell me what happened that day, from the beginning. The orange-haired girl hugged Togepi tighter and breathed deep. Ash, Brock and I were at the Pokémon Center, waiting for the staff to finish rejuvenating his Pokémon. Ash had just finished a battle against a friend of ours, Richie Trenton. You know about that, don't you? The detective nodded in confirmation. She followed the league's fixtures. Then, Brock told Ash to go to the hotel, to take a bath. He looked really horrible. Ash didn't want to go because he didn't want to leave his Pokémon. I told him that we would stay there until Ash returned. So he left and went to the hotel. After a while, we noticed that he was taking too long. Ash would never do that, not when his Pokémon were still receiving medical care. I went up to the hotel, and I went into the room, and Misty seemed to be to the point of cry. I saw him, in the door of the bathroom, all blood-stained, the bones sticking out of his skin, his arms and legs twisted in that horrible way. Misty closed her eyes, trying to force the nightmarish image out of her mind. Then I screamed for help. One of the employees of the hotel heard me and called the ambulance and the security police. She concluded, "Didn't you hear or see something suspicious?" No. Then the trainer reconsidered. When she had entered in the room, there was something strange, but she could not put her finger on it. Are you aware that Mr. Ketchum suffers from a genetic disease? Yes. For sure, she knew about that thing. Thank you, Miss Williams. You are free to go. Misty was about to get up when her cellular phone and Detective Jenny's rung simultaneously. Both received the same news. Misty smiled properly for the first time since Jenny entered the room. She then ran out carrying Togepi. Detective Jennifer Wigand asked the classic question in those cases, can he make a statement? Edward Jenner Building, June 14, 2063. Somebody observed Ash's hospital room, from the building on the other side of the street. The observer was in the total darkness, using a telescope designed for espionage work and equipped with a low-light level, starlight, image enhancer. The person in that apartment bit their lips with rage. Noticing the movement in the Pokémon trainer's room, the venom in the voice was stronger than the one of an Arbok. Mr. Ketchum, it will be better for everyone if you just don't wake up. The observer began to assemble something that he or she had brought in a suitcase. Viridian Forest, June 14, 2063. While Misty ran from the police station to the hospital as fast as she could, a balloon flew over Viridian Forest. Riding in that balloon was a blue-haired young man and a red-haired young woman, and a Meowth. The three sat quietly, watching the news. There's still or no clues regarding who could be responsible for the brutal attack against trainer Ash Ketchum. The reporter declared from in front of the hospital where Ash was hospitalized. According to the doctors, the trainer's condition remains serious, not only due to the injuries he received during the assault, but also due to a rare genetic disorder from which the young trainer is suffering. At that point, the three occupants of the balloon changed glances. Ash Ketchum's chances of recovering in time to face Lance Silver, the leader of the Elite Four, is extremely low. If he won that battle, he would go on to face Amanda Blackstone, the current League Supreme Champion, in the finals. At that point, Jessie Gibson turned off the TV set and looked at James Morgan, and she saw that he was concerned. Come on, James. Don't tell me that you are worried about what happens to that twerp. Of course not. I only wanted to know who would do a thing like that, that's all. Why? Meowth asked. Curiosity, James lied, shrugging in an easy-going way. He would never admit that he was concerned about Ash. They were enemies, all right, but James was human. With that there came a part of him that was repelled at such a brutal attack. But he would never admit that. Neither would Jessie. After all, they had a fearsome reputation to uphold. In spite of the fact that they once saved Ash's life. Sanders Island, Orange Archipelago. January 27, 2062. Jessie and James were ready to go crazy. Where were the twerps? They had been seeking them for 2 days in this blasted forest. Then, at that very moment, they saw Pikachu appear from behind a tree. Then he surprised them by making a gesture. Jessie, James said in a surprised tone, he seems to want us to follow him. Good, Meowth said. We will follow him, alright, to capture him. The cat-like Pokémon jumped at the electric Pokémon. He ended up with his face in the dirt thanks to a timely use of an agility defense by his prey. Pikachu called them again. Jessie and James looked at each other in confusion. What did that electric mouse want with them? They ran after Pikachu, they didn't have choice after all, until they arrived at the entrance of a cave. There they saw Pikachu's trainer, Ash, covered with Golbat bites and with 2 visible compound fractures to his arms. One of his legs was stuck out sideways at a right angle. They stared at the vision in horror and amazement, unable to figure out what they should do next. Pikachu Pika. Pikachu squeaked in an angry tone. Meowth, what did he say? He is asking us to help Ash. The trio of thieves stared in amazement. Pikachu was asking them for help. They looked at each other and then looked at the wounded and unconscious trainer. Listen here, you're walking battery. We are Pokemon thieves and not nurses. Jessie screamed. She couldn't understand why she felt the need to explain this. Jessie, he's almost dead. The blue-haired young man spoke, in a low tone, after examining Ash. Like it or not, they couldn't live with his death on their conscience. Okay, Jessie said, throwing up her hands in disbelief and resignation. What we can do? After workin' to stop the bleeding and immobilizing Ash's limbs, they took him in their balloon to Cobalton City, Sanders Island's largest city. After they left Ash in the hospital, they notified the local security police disguised, of course, who were searching for the missing trainer. Why did they help Ash, when that was the perfect chance to steal Pikachu? The answer to that question, neither of them knew. Viridian Forest. June 14, 2063. James broke the silence. Why we don't go to the city? Why? Hey, we can always steal some Pokemon from the Global League trainers. James suggested with a nervous shrug. I don't know. Meowth commented. Da boss don't like field teams to do jobs during da global games. That is true, Jessie commented. Although why he should care I couldn't tell you. Well, James suggested. At least we'll have the chance to see the league finals this year. That has got to be better than wandering around the forest doing nothing. That argument worked. Viridian City General Hospital. June 15, 2063. I only want to know what they are talking about inside there. Misty exclaimed, while she back and forwards in front of the doctor's room, where, right now, doctors were considering Ash Ketchum's condition. With her were Brock and Professor Oak. Delilah Ketchum refused to leave her son's side. Brock tried to calm down his friend. Calm down, Misty, he said. They will tell us the results of the examinations as soon as they can. It sounded reassuring, but both of them glared at the door still, willing someone to come out and tell them what was happening. Meanwhile, the medical team of Viridian City General Hospital was being informed of the progress of their most challenging case. Dr. Andrew Rupertson was in front of the table, pointing to a series of magnetic resonance images of somebody's skeleton, which looked more like an impossibly complex jigsaw puzzle. He cleared his throat. Well, you can see the skeleton of patient Ash Ketchum, including the multiple fractures across the whole body. Please note especially the trauma to the legs, arms and ribs. Here we have the image of the right leg, where the femur was fractured in 8 different places. How many fractures did he have in the total? Asked an intern, shocked by the images. The boss of the medical team took a deep breath before answering. 203. The doctors that were not still familiar with the case lost their speech. 203 fractures. The doctor that accompanied Ash's case from his birth, drive. Brenda Wiggins, spoke up. I understand your incredulity. But you should bear in mind that Mr. Ketchum suffers of a rare genetic disease, called osteogenesis imperfecta, that generates this effect. But, drive. Wiggins, how is that possible? That disease has origin in 2 recessive genes that inhibit the necessary production of collagen to give to the bones the normal strength and flexibility. The other symptom is the blue tone of the white of the eyes. She was interrupted by the orthopedist of the hospital, that pointed for a straight bar where should be Ash, right femur. I'm sorry to interrupt you, doctor, but there is a fact that doesn't fit. The magnetic resonance images shows that Mr. Ketchum's skeleton was reinforced with platinum prostheses, right? Dr. Wiggins nodded. She had supervised the microsurgical intervention that had placed the prostheses when the patient was 6 years old. But it seems that the bone simply came unfastened of that prosthesis. Certainly. I know what you are going to say. Somebody with such fragile bones that, even when they are surgically reinforced, broke so easily, should not survive. You are technically correct. Level 2, victims of osteogenesis imperfecta, like Mr. Ketchum, very rarely reach their second year of life. Please bear in mind, however, the clear violence of the attack. But the truth is that those implants' primary function is to act as a guide when resetting fractured bones, not keeping them securely in place. Then, the surgeons who stemmed the internal hemorrhages informed the group that they had repaired the internal injuries caused by the attack and by displaced bone fragments. Nonetheless, they insisted that the patient should rest as much as possible. Should we go for the restoration of the bones by means of nanorobots? No, our first priority is the stabilization of the patient's health. We will concentrate on repairing the fractures later. If they can be repaired, commented the orthopedist, looking at the images. Meanwhile, Detective Jennifer R. Wigand arrived to the 8th floor of the hospital. There she found her cousin, Officer Jenny Sterling. She was watching the patient's room. "Hi, Officer Jenny." "Hi, Detective Jenny." Both smiled at their private joke. Many of the daughters of their huge family seemed to end up in law enforcement in one form or another, but they were amongst the very few on the same city's police forces. The detective's face was serious. "Can he speak?" Her cousin shook her head uncertainly. "No one is ready to say, just yet. A lot depends on what the doctors decide. They're in a conference right now." "Hell, any clue?" "No." She didn't comment that the only possible clue would come from the lever used to attack Ash. There were no fingerprints or DNA, the crime scene was a forensic dead end. "Can he have visitors yet?" "The doctors have restricted it to his mother and his girlfriend for now. You can see him through the door's window." The detective looked through the window, and immediately stepped back. Her face twisted with incredulity and horror. She felt a sour nausea worming its way up her throat. Officer Jenny looked at her with kind smile. "Yes, you saw right." Detective Jenny Aproak had the window once again and she saw the victim for the first time. Being an investigator, she only entered in contact with the victims when she took their statements or when the case was closed. She was not prepared for the vision of a 13-year-old boy, completely immobilized with orthopedical devices and plaster. Cables ran out from between the various dressings and medical braces, connecting H.I.M. to the mass of machines that sustained life in his shattered body. Quietly, she left the hospital and went to her police car. She swore that she would find out who was responsible for such a barbarity. Legendary Birds Cafe. June 15, 2063. The trainers that competed in the Global League frequented the legendary Birds Cafe. The atmosphere was very tense today. This was entirely due to the attack on Ash Ketchum. By the force of their calling, trainers tended to be a close-knit community of people. An attack on one of them was an attack on all. On the TV, the reporter has just reported that Ash had regained consciousness. But visits were currently restricted to his family. Richie Trenton placed his cup of coffee back on the table before saying, mostly to himself, "I'm glad that Ash is recovering." A boy with a sandslash, who was sitting at the table at his side, heard him. "I'm sorry, but do you know Ash?" "Yes. We met each other when we both battled in the Indigo League, 3 years ago, and you are?" "Oh, excuse me. I'm AJ. Richie." The two trainers shook hands. Richie asked, "Then, do you know Ash yourself?" "Yes, we faced each other, I think when he began his journey. I defeat him that time." "Yeah." Richie laughed gently. "I won the battle I had with him in the Indigo League, but it was mostly because his Pokémon still hadn't recovered from fighting off Team Rocket. You know, if that hadn't happened, I think he would have won. Hell, he probably would have gone on to win the league." AJ nodded. He and the trainer from Pallet Town didn't agree with the right way to train a Pokémon. But both knew the other to be a formidable trainer. The two boys were in silence for a moment, then AJ asked, "Do you think Ash will recover in time to face Lance?" "I don't know. I only know that would be a great injustice to be disqualified for absence simply because someone attacked him." "Did you know that Ash suffers from some kind of genetic disease?" "No. I want to say, I knew that he had something different. Those weird blue eyes of his made that clear. But I never knew that his bones were so fragile." He shook the head. "If he is not tough enough to handle the stress of the Pokémon League, then he should not be competing." Richie and AJ turned surprised to the voice full of scorn that intruded on their conversation. It a tall, brown-haired, 13-year-old boy. Richie slammed his coffee cup back down onto the table with some force. The only reason you say that is envy, Gary. You still haven't forgiven Ash for wiping the floor with you in the first round of the Global League this year. Gary Oak didn't comment, but the expression of scorn continued. He couldn't believe that had been defeated by that freak. Pokémon Global League Stadium, Viridian City. May 10, 2063. The umpire walked to the arena's center mark and stood for a moment. The Stadium Tanway system relayed his words to the audience. Final bout, he announced. The score stands at Oak 2, Ketchum 2. Oak to select first. There was a long pause. Gary sneered at Ash. That freak had held him back for too long. Now Gary would show him that the Pokémon League had no place for charity cases. Okay, he said. Get ready, Mr. Glass. Go Arcanine. Ash sneered when he heard Gary's childhood taunt. You are so full of it, Gary. Charizard, I choose you. Ash's Charizard roared and landed right in front of Gary's huge fire wolf. There was a long, frozen pause, then the siren sounded signifying the start of the bout. Arcanine, multi-fireball attack. Charizard, dodge up. Charizard rose over the hail of fireballs spat out by Arcanine. In response to a command from Ash, he leaned over and breathed out a massive flamethrower attack down at the dog-like Pokémon. Arcanine backpedaled, barely dodging the attack. The battle continued for 90 long seconds. Arcanine and Charizard were very closely matched. Finally, however, Gary managed to pull an unexpected card from his sleeve. Charizard had just missed with a Thunder Stomp attack and Arcanine had circled behind him. Now, Arcanine, Gary shouted. Firestorm attack. Arcanine howled and breathed in. The whole stadium looked on, aghast, as Arcanine breathed out a massive fireball that consumed Charizard. Only the attack did not end there. The massive column of flame continued to blaze for a long minute. The flames were so intense that no one could even look at them. The sand on the arena floor actually began to melt and solidify into glass. Charizard. No. Ash shouted. Gary, call him off. Gary just laughed. After the attack was over, Arcanine slumped wearily, at the very end of his strength. He barely managed to drag himself back to his starting place at Gary's end of the starting circle. Of Charizard, nothing could be seen. Just a bus-sized solid lump at the center of a massive blazing pyre. Tears streaming down his face, Ash slumped gently to his knees, not caring if it broke his legs. All right, so Charizard was a pain. But he didn't deserve this. Then the lump in the center of the flames began to glow brightly. The glow started at red but built up through orange, yellow, blue and then to white. Ash covered his eyes and cried out. Then there was a massive roar that forced him to look again. The flames were gone. Charizard was gone. In their place was a gigantic red dragon the size of a small airliner. It was something from a medieval fantasy novel, or a D&D-like role-playing game. The huge animal stretched its 150-foot span wings, raised its head to the sky and roared, Cha-Arun. Ash swallowed and pulled himself painfully to his feet. He pulled out his Pokédex and pointed it at the massive Pokémon in front of him. No match found, Dexter reported. Unknown type, repeat unknown type. Gary stood there amazed. Ash was just as shocked, but his finely tuned tactical sense told him that he had been given a second chance. Ah, Karen, he called. Flamethrower attack. At once, my trainer. Ash heard in his head. Karen breathed in, and then spewed out a solid stream of fire over 3 meters across. Arcanine was struck full on and blown back against the far wall. The singed fire type collapsed into unconsciousness without a single murmur. No, Gary shouted. No, that isn't possible. Charizard don't evolve. They don't. Gary continued screaming at his bad luck and ignored his fallen Pokémon. Which was pretty typical for him, Ash thought scornfully. One of the umpires checked Arcanine over, but it was a formality. Arcanine cannot continue, he reported. The bout goes to Ash Ketchum and Karen. Bout and match, Ketchum. The crowd went wild, and cutting through their cheers was Karen's ear-bursting roar of victory. Legendary Birds Cafe. June 15, 2063. Richie and AJ forgot about Gary Oak when they heard the door of the cafe open up, as if it had been kicked. They turned around, stayed silent when they saw who was entering. She was a very pretty woman, 25 years old, tall. Very clear skin, long black hair, and eyes an icy blue shade. She walked with if she was the owner of the place. She looked more a biker or a vampire with black leather body armor she habitually wore, than the Pokémon Master Trainer that the Pokeballs at her waist showed that she was. Everybody knew her. She was Amanda Blackstone, the current champion of the Global League, and the gym leader's deputy at Viridian City's Earth Gym. What everyone also knew was her reputation as a brutal, success-oriented trainer who considered the rules of conduct things that applied to others. Amanda looked at the TV set and lit a cigarette. "So, guys," she said. "What's the latest word? Is that little boy recovering?" "Yes." AJ spoke. "Worried, Amanda?" She shook the head, completely calm. "No," she assured him. "Oh, there is no doubt that he is good." She sneered. "There is no doubt he could make mincemeat out of you lot, but he is still light years away from matching me." She sat down in a chair close to the window, and leaned back, sticking her boots up on the table. AJ and Richie glanced covertly at each other. They knew that was not true. Ash Ketchum was the first trainer that anyone considered to have some chance of defeating her. Actually, she was the only one who benefited from Ash's sudden departure from the Global League. "Did you already hear the rumors about her?" AJ asked. Richie nodded. The two trainers looked at the league champion. Viridian City General Hospital, June 15, 2063. As soon as the doctors left the doctor's room, Misty ran up to the medical team chief, asking about Ash's condition. "How is he? Can he receive visits?" "Well, yes, he can receive visits, but just one at a time." They decided that Misty would be the first person. Hugging Togepi, she opened the door and saw Delilah holding her son's hand stronger than she thought she dared. The patient smiled when he saw her, with the broken maxilla immobilized with strips. The voice was just a whisper. "Hi Misty." Viridian Hotel, June 15, 2063. It was already late at night, when Brock Harrison left his friend in the door of her room. "Rest a little, Misty." Sighing, she asked, "Can you rest?" Brock. He just nodded and went to his own room. Misty Williams entered her room and went directly to the bed. She lay there, still wearing her day clothes. She would not get to sleep in that night. She knew that much. The girl looked at Togepi, and she saw that the small egg Pokémon slept, with a sad expression on his little face. She remembered the visit he had made today and a tear left her right eye. Viridian City General Hospital, June 15, 2063. "Hi Misty." "Hi Ash." She observed her friend and felt her heart squeeze in distress. He seemed to be Reed in the grasp of a high-tech version of a medieval torture machine. Of his face, she could only see his mouth and those strange, hypnotic, brown-on-blue eyes. His arms, the legs and the chest were wrapped up with orthopedical braces. The whole effect was to make Ash look like some kind of experimental robot. Wires and tubes came out from everywhere. She knew the terrible power of the disease that afflicted her friend, but now she saw with crystal clarity what his attacker had done with him and what he had to fight every day. Forest between Pewter City and Cerulean City, May 22, 2060. Furtively, Misty approached Ash's backpack, while he slept in that amazing super-cushioned sleeping bag. She didn't understand why he slept in that thing or why he used those armored knee and elbow pads all the time. Or why he had a special permission to carry a medical chancy. Or why he had broken both of his arms twice and his right leg once. Or why the white of his eyes had a blue tone. She hoped the answers were in what she was now looking for. "I found it," she said, waking up Pikachu and Brock, while Ash slept peacefully. He was the deepest sleeper in the world in her opinion. "Misty, what?" Brock began to ask. When she gestured to him to keep quiet, she went to him with Ash's Pokédex. Brock didn't like that, but he, too, was curious about the secrets of the young boy quickly becoming his friend. Pikachu looked on with disapproval, but it didn't take any action. They opened the personal details file and, on a whim, checked Ash's medical records. "Warning," Dexter announced. "The carrier of this Pokédex is victim of osteogenesis imperfecta, level 2. Repeating, the carrier of this Pokédex is victim of osteogenesis imperfecta, level 2. Misty and Brock looked at each other questioningly. "Osteogenesis what?" Misty highlighted the name and pressed the "Define" button. "Osteogenesis imperfecta, genetic disease that causes the victim's body to generate insufficient levels of collagen." As Dexter explained the symptoms of the disease in its inappropriately cheery voice, they understood the curse that Ash carried in his DNA. Extremely fragile bones. Any impact could cause a fracture. Quote, possible loss of hearing. Estimated lifespan for level 2 sufferers, 2 years maximum. It seemed unreal. Ash was so full of life, so utterly without fear or uncertainty. It was impossible that he could be suffering from a crippling disease that all the medics in the world were certain should have killed him over 8 years ago. In time, however, they would understand the full gravity of his situation. Viridian City General Hospital, June 15, 2063. To hide her concern, Misty tried to tease Ash in her usual snide tone. It seems that you got it, Ash. You look worse than Brock when he was dumped by Michelle. Delilah looked shocked. What kind of comment was that to make to her son? But when Ash laughed, she noticed that was a Partic. Ular joke that the two youngsters must have shared before. Yeah, I think. How do you feel? He paused before answering. Broken. Ash. Hey, I'm alive, aren't I? He stated simply. And then he smiled a sad smile. Misty and Delilah glanced nervously at each other. Sure, Ash. The water Pokemon trainer smiled nervously. Have the doctors said anything yet? He asked. Well, they say that you should rest as much as possible and. Quote. Misty. Can I walk? The desperation and worry in Ash's voice silenced Misty immediately. She knew that Ash's greatest fear related to the disease was that, one day, he would have a fracture in the spine that would leave him paraplegic or worse paralyze him totally. She didn't want him to worry, but she could not lie to him. The doctors haven't said anything about that yet. He nodded and stayed silent. When Misty was about to open her mouth, Ash asked about his Pokemon. He never will change, she thought in exasperation, always more worried about others than about himself. But immediately she regretted such thoughts. After all, once Ash hurt himself to help her. Exit of New Bark City. August 23, 2062. Misty felt the cold of Butch's .44 Magnum at her head. His partner, Cassidy, aimed her gold-plated .45 automatic pistol at Ash. Behind the Team Rocket terrorists, the New Bark River ran in a ravine far below. And then, Glass Boy. Ash winced at the insult. Will you give to us your Pokemon and your Pikachu, or not? Cassidy asked, a vicious smile in the lips. I thought that was Jesse and James's job. He said. Ash wasn't really interested in the division of labor in Team Rocket. He was just trying to win time. Great time for Brock to be in the New Bark Pokemon Breeders' Convention. He thought in anger and worry. Well, consider this a way of you compensate for the times that you caused us such trouble. He heard Butch laugh at Cassidy's rather lame joke. Ash, don't do it. Misty begged. Pikachu. Ash began to speak. That's right, Pikachu. Throw a Thunder Shock attack with someone holding a metal weapon against your friend's head. Butch said in an ironic tone. The electricity will go from the weapon direct to fry her brain. Pikachu and Ash looked one for the other. What choice did they have? All right, the Pokemon trainer said in an angry tone. The two thieves didn't notice that Ash was making a series of gestures to Pikachu. Ash walked towards Butch and Cassidy, removing his Pokebelt slowly. Butch and Cassidy smiled triumphantly. Misty, tears streaming down her cheeks, begged quietly for him to change his mind. Then everything happened very fast. Ash threw himself against Butch and Cassidy, at the same time that Pikachu pulled Misty in the opposite direction. The thieves and the trainer rolled down into ravine below. Ash stopped rolling short of the riverbank, while the fast-flowing water swept Butch and Cassidy away. Misty went down the fastest that she could to help her wounded friend. She couldn't even imagine what agony he felt right now. His left leg was completely broken, lying in a zigzag line. His arms were broken too, sticking out at impossible angles. The only thing that the LF hysterical Cerulean City gym leader could do, other than release Ash's Chansey and to call New Bark Central Hospital, was hold her unconscious friend's head. Viridian City General Hospital, June 15, 2063. Pikachu and Chikorita are resting there in the runner, with Brock. Your other Pokemon are in the Pokemon Center. They want to know when they can visit you, because they are very concerned. Even Karen. Misty told her friend. Karen. There was surprise in the blue and brown eyes. Well, he said, he can be a brat, but he is a good friend. Can you thank him for that? That comment coming from Karen, meant a lot. Sure. Misty touched her friend's free hand carefully. She was terrified of causing him more hurt than that he was already suffering. After a moment, she asked the Scion that Detective Jenny would like to ask too. Ash, did you see who did this? He sighed. I don't remember, everything was so fast. You don't need to worry about that now, Ash. First, worry about recovering. Delilah said in a strong, motherly tone. Sure, he murmured, in an indecipherable tone, almost sounding defeated. That had frozen Misty's heart. Her friend had never spoken in such a way. When will they let me have a prognosis? The doctor in charge of your case said that they would tell us tomorrow. Misty said, trying to keep her tone positive, to encourage her friend. But Ash's eyes showed that hope was something that he lacked at that moment. He knew the worst-case scenario of the disease. Viridian Hotel, June 15, 2063. There was another person that couldn't sleep, Brock. He walked to and fro in his room, scratching his head. He was concerned about his friend, anyone could see that. After all, that was the worst situation in than Ash could be, and he was AFR. 8 of what could be going through the over-intense kid's head right now. He knew how Ash didn't want to be beaten by his disease. He remembered very well that time so long ago, when he met Ash for the first time as a brash young challenger for the Boulder Badge. It was Ash's second attempt and it looked like he was going to win. Ash was about to give the final order so that Pikachu would launch one final attack and defeat his Onix. But Brock's little brothers and sisters could not stand by and watch their beloved big brother's Pokémon hurt. Boulder Gym, Pewter City, May 15, 2060. Brock's siblings rushed Ash in a mob, trying to stop him from hurting Onix. Brock's brother, Steel, seized Ash's right arm and twisted it in an attempt to restrain him, and Brock could not believe what he saw. Ash's arm snapped to the side before his eyes. Steel was not that strong, it wasn't possible. Ash screamed in surprise and agony and fell to his knees in the center of the knot of Harrison kids. Brock's brothers and sisters all leapt back as if knocked away by some force. Some of the younger girls like Ruby and Sapphire began to scream at the impossible angle of the arm Ash was cradling to his side, his face pale and shocked. Even Onix and Pikachu stopped in their own battle. Pika Pie! Pikachu shouted, leaping to Ash's side. The little electric-type Pokémon hugged Ash's injured arm gently, trying to support it and draw it back into its place. Ash's friend, Misty, the assistant gym leader over at Cerulean City if Brock's memory served, looked on at the scene in utter horror. Oh God! Brock shouted uselessly. He stepped forward. Ash, are you? Brock was about to ask Ash if he was all right, but he could see that he was not. What suddenly hit Brock was the strange expression on Ash's face. The boy had clearly got over his initial shock. Even though he was in pain, his primary expression was a mixture of resignation, shock, and revulsion. Brock spent a long afternoon pacing around his office at the gym, trying to make sense of what he had seen. He also had to reassure Steel, who was in hysterics, convinced that he had murdered the boy from Pallet Town. That evening, Misty sent Brock word that Ash had, somehow, broken his arm in 3 places. It was a torrid night at the gym leader's residence. Brock had little sleep. All his younger brothers and sisters had full nightmares about the boy who broke like he was made of glass. Steel, especially, hardly slept at all. Brock could not reassure them, because he could not understand what had happened himself. To Brock's amazement, Ash returned the next day and challenged him for the Boulder Badge once again. A third time, his arm was encased in an external prosthesis that made it look like he had a robot limb. Despite his incomprehensible injury, Ash was not in any way daunted. He used his Caterpie to lasso Onix and he managed to defeat the rock snake in record time, immobilizing him without actually knocking him out. Then Ash put Pikachu up against Geodude and it looked like he was going to win easily, but at the very last moment, Ash refused to give Pikachu the order to finish Geodude off. His reasons, as he explained to Brock, were simple. He had no desire to win if that involved seriously injuring a Pokémon. I know what pain is, Brock, Ash explained. I'll be damned if I cause it in another creature for my own ends. Brock had to admire such principles. He told Ash that this proved that he was worthy of being a Pokémon trainer. By his courage and his care for his and other trainers' friends, he passed Brock's standards. So, Even though he had not defeated the gym leader as tradition demanded, Ash received the Boulder Badge. Viridian Hotel, June 15, 2063. Brock smiled sadly as he remembered that day. It had been a long journey for all of them, but not once had he seen Ash go back on his principle to never cause pain for any creature if he could avoid it. Now, the Pewter City Gym leader could only wish that Ash recovered as fast as possible. Office of Kimberly Steleon, Pokémon Global League Headquarters, Viridian City, June 15, 2063. Ash's friends were not the only ones having problems getting to sleep that night. In the headquarters of the Pokémon League, a middle-aged red-haired woman paced to and fro in her palatial offices. Kimberly Steleon, the Grand Master of the Pokémon League, and possibly the greatest living trainer, hated the decision that she was being forced to make. Before her was a formal proposal sent to her office by the leader of Viridian City's Earth Gym, Giovanni Carpenter. The proposal demanded the immediate expulsion of Ash Ethan Ketchum from the Pokémon League. By the league's rules, any gym leader could demand the disqualification of a trainer if he or she violated the rules of conduct. But this request was for a different reason. It was Giovanni's opinion that Ash Ketchum's trainer's license should be indefinitely suspended on the grounds that the boy was medically unfit to train Pokémon. Kimberly gritted her teeth. She knew Giovanni only too well. In his youth, he was one of the most unpleasant trainers in the league. In adulthood, he was one of the most brutal gym leaders in the league. Because of that, they already had several arguments, but this petty malice was too much. Her eyes fastened onto a photo in the wall of the office. It was a photo of her when she had won the Indigo League for the first time. The girl in the photo seemed not to believe that she had won. Kimberly smiled at the memories. The reality was very different from the living legend that she was now. She imagined how she would feel if somebody expelled her of the league in that time. After all, she had been as afflicted as young Ketchum had been. If only in a different way. She could easily imagine the effect that even a suspension of his license would have in the young trainer from Pallet Town. She knew that, as Giovanni had made his request through formal channels, she was required to summon a meeting of all the gym leaders from the 4 league divisions to discuss Giovanni's proposal. She didn't have choice. The meeting was marked for the day before Ash Ketchum's scheduled battle with Lance Silver of the Elite Four. But she had to talk with somebody before the meeting. Local. Elsewhere. Date. Elsewhere. He ran faster and faster. Through that silent forest and of the cold night. He had to run faster. If not, the shadows could catch him. Where was Pikachu? And Misty? And Brock? He implored that any of his friends appeared there. He looked all around him, trying to find them. But he could not scream for help. Suddenly, the left leg was broken. The pain was terrible, and he couldn't hold back his scream. Then he heard steps approaching. A woman's voice commenting, "Sadistic. He is around here." He had to get out of there, broken leg or not. Trying to stand the pain, he began to run again, dragging the leg. He fell again, breaking 2 ribs and a bone of the right arm. The shadows appeared in front of him on that exact moment. They were 2 titanic beings, which seemed to be nothing more than gigantic human shadows. The Shadow Man threw a black rope of its arm, which coiled around Ash's neck and lifted him off of the ground. Then he was thrown against one of the trees. The sound of the bones breaking echoed through the forest. The pain was so intense that he couldn't even scream. The Shadow Woman said, when catching her victim, "This is the sound that I love more than anything." And then she laughed. "Help!" Ash screamed. "There is no one to help you, aberration." The Shadow Man spoke with scorn. Ash felt the cold hands of the Shadow Woman enter his body, and disintegrate every bone in his body. Ash woke up screaming. In his room in the Viridian City General Hospital, bathed in a cold sweat and trembling so violently that the various medical devices attached to his body rattled like some kind of percussion instrument. His mother, who had been asleep in a chair, woke up quickly and ran to him. "Ash, what happened?" Her face twisted with fear and concern. He couldn't answer, he only could close his eyes, trying to forget the nightmare. But he wasn't very successful in attaining to that goal. Viridian Hotel, June 16, 2063. Brock woke up with 2 strident sounds, the ringer of his cell phone and the sound of Misty knocking on the door. Brock, wake up. Still dizzy for not having slept enough, he went and opened the door. What's going on, Misty? See this? She exclaimed breathless. He looked at Misty's cell phone. In the LCD text display, he read the message that blinked insistently. It was the same one that, when he checked later, blinked on the screen of his own cell phone. From Kimberly Stelion, president of the Pokémon Global League. To all the gym leaders of the league. Subject: emergency meeting. All the gym leaders of the Indigo, Orange, Johto, and Global Leagues are summoned for an emergency meeting in Viridian City, to be accomplished in the afternoon, on June 17, 2063. I apologize for such a hasty summons, but the subject is of extreme importance. Please, your presence is necessary and urgently required. Kimberly Stelion, president of the Pokémon Global League. June 15, 2063. A meeting on June 17. But, it's tomorrow. Brock exclaimed, confused. He tried to imagine why the Grand Master would summon the gym leaders so hastily. Then he understood, just as well as Misty had already perceived. There was just a reason for such a meeting. Ash, he murmured. Misty shook her head in disbelief and horror, confirming rather than denying Brock's fears. Eldridge Avenue. June 16, 2063. Detective Jenny Wigand noticed immediately as H. Urquhart turned into the street that passed the City General Hospital. Looking at the building, she remembered the frightening image that she'd seen on the previous day. Automatically, she began to recollect the details of her investigations. No clues on the weapon or in the scene of the crime. No witnesses, and the victim was not still in a fit condition to give her a statement. Translation: she was in the dark. And the only person that could give her a clue was in the hospital. She sighed. Her boss was pressuring her hard to make some progress in the case, but she didn't need that. What she had seen in the hospital yesterday was already motivation enough. Good luck, she murmured to the courageous boy that was resting 8 floors above her. Thunder suddenly roared and lightning flashed. Jenny shivered in a deep, superstitious fear. She had the strangest feeling that someone something was most interested in the outcome of this investigation. Viridian City General Hospital. June 16, 2063. Dr. Andrew Rupertson breathed in deeply and looked around at his team. Are you sure about this? Because I will have to convince the patient, and that will be difficult. Slowly, each one of the members of the medical team agreed. The air in the ready room was grim and serious. 15 minutes later, accompanied by Dr. Brenda Wiggins and Dr. Michael Cook, the hospital's chief orthopedist, he began to explain to Ash Ketchum and his family of his prognosis. First, we will have to guarantee that there is no damage to your internal organs nor any current infections in the wounds you suffered during the assault. We anticipate that those tests will take no more than 1 month. Then we will reassemble your bones by means of nanorobotic cellular and molecular construction machines. We will start with the bones of the head and of the chest, and then move on to reassembling the superior and inferior members. Rupertson grimaced gently and looked into Ash's eyes. As you are aware, for nanorobotic reassembly to work, you will have to be completely immobilized for the entire procedure, which should take between 8 to 11 weeks, depending on how many fragments the nanorobots have to reassemble. The rain calmly beat on the window of Ash Ketchum's room. The eyes of Ash, Delilah, Professor Oak and Misty didn't waver from the face of the doctor. Dr. Rupertson sincerely wished that the patient hadn't insisted that his girlfriend stayed in the room. The last thing he wanted to deal with was a hysterical teenage girl. Then the patient interrupted him, in a worried tone. Doctor, excuse me for interrupting you, Ash said, but were there any lesions in my spine? Well, there was no damage to your spinal cord. Dr. Wiggins answered, a little evasively. M.I. Sty breathed in happily when she heard that news, but not Ash or Delilah. They knew better. To continue, the head of the medical team resumed. After the reassembly, we will reprogram the nanorobots to assemble, molecule by molecule, prosthetic rods to help your bones support your body weight. This should take no more than 2 weeks. You will begin biofeedback treatment simultaneously with THE nanorobotic therapy to avoid muscular atrophy. After the nanorobots complete constructing the prosthesis and we are sure they are secure, you will switch over to conventional physiotherapy. Prosthetic rods? Misty asked. What does that mean, doctor? It is a procedure normally used in cases of OI if the patient has suffered an extensive trauma, Ms. Williams. The nanorobots will assemble a telephone escoping rod made of a dense metal like platinum or titanium in the core of the patient's long bones, spine and pelvis. As well as increasing the impact resistance of the bones by about 50%, they also create a template for the bones to grow around despite the collagen deficiency. Dr. Cook explained. This technology has, thankfully, virtually eliminated the grotesque malformations that used to be common in cases like this. How long will the treatment take? Delilah asked. The doctor swallowed dryly. The complete regimen from infection treatment to the completion of primary physiotherapy will take 9 months. In the best case, 9 months, Misty thought, her face reflecting her shock and horror. Misty turned to look at Ash's face and saw those unforgettable brown on blue eyes show in hardness that she was all too familiar with. The very first time she saw that particular look was those 3 long years ago, shortly after Misty and a reluctant Brock had examined Ash's medical files in his Pokédex. Cascade Gym, Cerulean City, May 27, 2060. What am I doing? I can't fight Ash, Misty thought helplessly as she took her place at the gym leader's end for the Pokémon battle. Ash Street, oohed fearlessly at his place on the other side of the pool. She saw water everywhere. Of course, this is the Cerulean City Cascade Gym, a water Pokémon gym. Me and my big mouth. She berated herself angrily. She had to open her mouth to defend the honor of the gym, assuming that one of her sisters would gladly step forward to do the defending. But, as Daisy had always insisted, it was Misty who was the fighting trainer of the sensational sisters. You ready yet? Ash yelled defiantly. He is incredible, she thought. If he slips he could be crippled, but he is still fearless. He really scares me sometimes. Misty drew in a deep, shuddering breath. Not having any other choice, she had to play the role. Get ready, Ash Ketchum. She called back. Begin. Daisy, her older sister, announced. Misty chooses Starmie, she shouted. She threw forward a blue and white aqua-type Pokeball, which split open mid-air to release the 5-pointed starfish-like water type. Pikachu, I choose you, Ash countered. Unfortunately, his Pokémon was unwilling to fight Misty and Starmie, a comrade in many battles against Team Rocket. The electric mouse clutched in Ash's arm when he tried to toss him forward, wearing an uncertain expression. The unexpected weight threw Ash off balance and he staggered, the challenger's float pitching and rolling wildly. Ash, be careful, Misty screamed. Ash dropped WN low and waited for the float to stabilize. After regaining his balance, Ash glared at Misty suspiciously, that mathematical-like tactical sense of his processing her unusual behavior. What is going on, Misty? Please, Ash, you've got to be careful, Misty pleaded with him. If you fell on that concrete floor with your disease. Then she covered her mouth with her hand, realizing that had said far too much. Ash was silent for a moment, with a surprised expression in his face. How do you know about my disease? He asked in a cold tone that made Misty want to hide. I saw the emergency medical warning in your Pokédex, she admitted, her face red with shame. Ash stared at Misty for a long, silent minute, his face expressionless and hard with a keen sense of rage and betrayal. Pikachu, return, he grated. He turned and, without another word, left the Cascade Gym. Like, what disease? Lily wanted to know. What's wrong with him, Misty? Misty, for the first time she could recall, lost her temper with her good-natured older sister. She told her, with an unrepeatable profanity, to leave her alone, and fled as fast as she could run. Later, Misty and Brock sat in a small cafe near the gym. Ash had finally calmed down, but the two gym leaders were still shifting uncomfortably under their friend's hard, accusing gaze. Do you mind telling me, he asked in a hard, furious tone, why you sneaked a look at my medical records, without my permission? Well, Brock tried to explain, we were curious about you and, if you were curious why you didn't ask me before. You started peeking into personal information. The two trainers couldn't offer an answer to that which could convince them, let alone Ash. I don't believe that you read my medical records. Ash repeated. I'm sorry, Ash. That was my idea, Misty said. Ash directed his fiery brown gaze on her and Misty felt her face go red. She tried to explain her reasoning. I'd figured something big was up, Ash. If we'd asked, you would tell about Oi. Ash's gaze became soft and tired. No, he simply answered. Why not? Brock asked, carefully. Because I know what happens when people know about that, he said in a low tone. Without looking at them, they think that I am a freak or that I am like a porcelain doll that has to be wrapped in cotton wool and never allowed to live the life that so-called normal people live. Misty looked at Brock and they both remembered when Ash broke his arm in the Boulder gym. The fact was Ash was playing with fire just being outside a hospital. Ash Lee FTED the eyes and looked his two friends in the eyes. Well, I am normal, he said defiantly, and I am going to prove it. After a moment, he laughed in a bitter, ironic tone. When I was 6 years old, my nickname was Mr. Glass. A friend of mine by the name of Gary Oak said it was because I broke so easily. There was an undertone to the word, friend, that made Misty shiver. The two gym leaders were in silence. They could understand all too well the reason Ash tried to hide his affliction. After all, Misty was a girl who had fought all her life to be free of her family's ambitions and demands. Brock was a man who had lived a role for his entire life and was only now trying to do what he wanted to do. They both knew what it was like to have something in the background, holding you back. After a long, reverent silence, Misty finally spoke in a whisper. Ash, how fragile are you? Ash's face was pale. There was a lot of pain in the answer to that question. He drew in a breath before speaking. Well, I was born with both my arms and both my legs, besides 3 ribs, broken by the force of my mother's contractions. I've spent, in all, about 3 of my 10 years in hospital. Brock swallowed dryly in horror. Tears ran from Ash's eyes in that strange, silent crying that so fascinated Misty. Pikachu patted Ash's arm gently. Chu-pai Pikachu Kachu Ka, Pika-pai, I will look after you, Ash. The little electric mouse said comfortingly. Ash hugged Pikachu gratefully. After a moment he stood and looked into Misty and Brock's eyes again. If you could consider me a normal person, then I am grateful to have you at my side, he announced. But if you cannot see me in that light, well, then I don't think we need to see each other ever again. Then he turned away and left. Pikachu jumped to his trainer's shoulder and looked back at them in a sad, lonely way. Brock and Misty only could look at each other in deep embarrassment and shame. The following day, Ash challenged the Williams sisters again for the Cascade badge. But, again, the only one that appeared to defend the gym was Misty. Don't hold back, Misty, Ash said sternly. If you have any respect for me, if you have any respect for this gym, you will give me all that you have. Pikachu, standing at Ash's side, nodded firmly. Misty swallowed dryly. You might have reason to regret saying that, she announced. This is going to be a full novice bout. 3 Pokemon in one-on-one bouts. No changes mid-bout, got that? Ash nodded. The best out of 3 wins, Misty continued, if there is no clear winner after 3 bouts. We will continue until either one of us wins a bout or has no Pokemon left to use. Ash nodded firmly. He was at a technical disadvantage here, and he knew it. Misty, a gym leader, had 20 Pokemon of the water and Psy-type to call on. He just had Pikachu, Butterfree and Pidgeotto. Well, I'll just have to use quality over quantity, he thought to himself. Let's do it, Ms. Williams, he said formally. Misty nodded and drew a Pokeball. Misty chooses Magikarp, she said. Magikarp hit the water with a small, neat splash. Go, Butterfree, Ash said, releasing his newly evolved bug type. M.I. Sty frowned as Butterfree swooped over the pool. That wasn't what she expected at all. Ash was far more comfortable with Pikachu. Additionally, a bug type was at a disadvantage against a water type. Magikarp, water gun attack, she commanded. Ash simply gestured to the left and Butterfree agilely dodged the jet of water Magikarp spat out of the pool. Misty frowned again. She repeated the attack 3 times, then 4 times. And each time Ash could keep his Pokemon just out of Magikarp's reach. As yet, Ash had made no counterattack. Okay, Magikarp, she snapped, Vortex attack. Magikarp began to swim in a tight circle, generating a whirlpool that he would launch at Butterfree. Ash finally countered, and used the most devastating attack his Butterfree could offer. Butterfree, Confusion attack. No human could hear it. But Butterfree began to emit an ultrasonic wail that affected Magikarp's nervous system and sense of balance. Disoriented and unable to concentrate, the water-type Drow PPED out of his vortex attack and charged blindly across the pool, colliding with one of the concrete walls with a loud crunch. He slowly came to the surface and lay on his side, twitching occasional. Why as he tried to get his sense of balance back. Misty winced in empathic sympathy. Magikarp, dive, she implored. Sleep dust, Ash commanded. Butter oot free. Butterfree cooed gently. The bug type began to waft dust down onto the stunned fish-like Pokémon. Magikarp, concentrate on my voice, Misty called. Dive. Magikarp shook his head and dropped below the surface. Misty could see that he was groggy. He obviously didn't have much left to offer. Misty watched as Butterfree responded to Ash's silent command to return to hovering over the center of the pool. She had to end this now. She gestured to Magikarp, describing a U-shape in the air. The water type dived down deep and began to curve up towards Butterfree. Keep alert, Butterfree, Ash warned. Now, Magikarp body slam. Misty shouted. Magikarp exploded vertically out of the water, traveling about 25 knots and struck Butterfree full on. The bug type tumbled across the gym and crashed to the ground at the side of the pool. Water gun, Misty ordered. Magikarp stuck his head out of the water and spat a stream of water at Butterfree, who was just staggering to his feet. The bug went down and, this time, stayed down. You win, Misty, Ash said gently. He recalled his fallen friend and turned back to face her. Misty checked his face. There was no fear, no hesitation and no uncertainty. He wanted to continue. She sighed deeply. Okay, the score is Williams 1. Ketchum 0, she announced in the echoingly empty fighting area. Second bout, Misty chooses Seal. Pidgeotto, I choose you, Ash countered. Pidgeotto, screeched as he emerged from his Pokeball. Misty paused for a moment before starting the bout. Seal, Omni Blast. The force beam missed Pidgeotto by a wide margin and slammed into the hardened glass in front of the viewing area, making it buckle. Aurora Shield, Misty continued, figuring that Ash would respond with a Razor Feather throw attack. Ash surprised her. Tornado attack, he ordered. Shielded or not, Seal was caught up in the miniature whirlwind created by Pidgeotto's fast circling flight. The vortex picked the amazed water type up and slammed him hard against the gym wall. Follow with Razor Feather, Ash ordered. A hail of razor-sharp feathers, laced with neurotransmitter-dampening venom flashed through the air and stabbed into Seal's belly, making the water type bellow in pain and surprise. Misty could imagine the agony of that attack and cowered instinctively. Seal, get in the water, quick, she called. Seal. Seal responded, sliding back into the pool. Misty watch. D thoughtfully as Pidgeotto returned to hovering above the center mark. Seal, multiple Omni Blast, she ordered. The most puzzling thing happened. As Ash guided Pidgeotto through the flak-like series of force blasts. His face was twisted with concern. Of course, he didn't want Pidgeotto hurt badly, no decent trainer ever wished pain on his Pokémon, but there was something else here. She shook her head angrily. She would have to figure it out later. Seal was badly hurt and couldn't keep up these useless attacks much longer. Seal, drill horn, she ordered. The water type dived and then swung a round to throw himself into the air and spear Pidgeotto on his powerful horn. Ash described a half circle in the air and then held up his right hand, palm open. Misty frowned. Now what? She asked herself. Seal exploded out of the water. Just as Magikarp did before. Now, Ash shouted, but Pidgeotto was already moving. The bird-like flying type swung up and over to seize Seal by the scruff of his neck. Using the water type's momentum against him, he carried Seal forward and slammed him against the glass partition hard. Seal collapsed into a heap, wearing a silly cross-eyed grin. Pidgeotto returned Ned to his trainer and went back into a hover. Misty already knew that the bout was over. Well done, Ash, she called with a wry smile. And commiserations to you, Seal, she added quietly, recalling her stunned friend to his Pokeball. She watched Ash stroke Pidgeotto's chest feathers and say a few words of congratulation before recalling him. The match stands at Williams 1, Ketchum 1, Misty announced after a moment. As you won the last bout, you choose first, Ash. As if you have much choice, she added silently. Pikachu, I choose you. Ash announced. Misty chooses Starmie, Misty responded. Both Pokémon took their places without hesitation. Ash had obviously explained the situation to his little friend. The electric mouse showed not a hint of hesitation this time. Misty suddenly had an epiphany. She understood Ash's additional concern for Pidgeotto in the previous bout. Ash broke so easily, so very easily. So much so that he instinctively avoided doing things like running and jumping in an attempt to avoid putting too much strain on his weak bones. That fear extended to his Pokémon, even though they were much tougher than he was, tougher than even humans with normal bones were. That was his weakness, and Starmie could exploit that. Misty felt like a witch even considering doing this, but Ash had asked her not to hold back. Pikachu, Thunder Shock. Starmie, Agility. Street. Army leapt off of his platform and twirled through the air. The Thunder Shock struck the platform with a loud bang of discharged electricity and Misty saw Street Elmo's fire flash around its metal mooring chains. She was suddenly very glad to be wearing trainers with non-conducting soles. Shuriken Attack. Starmie span through the air right at Pikachu. Ash jerked in surprise at the sudden melee attack and gestured desperately for Pikachu to dodge the attack. There followed a series of near misses as Pikachu followed his trainer's commands, dodging attack after whirling attack. Misty pointed to the platform in front of Pikachu. Starmie dropped from the air and landed in front of Pikachu. Ash could have won if he had considered using a fighting attack like Kick or Pound, but he had a blind spot there. He ordered Pikachu to back off as Starmie fired off a laser pulse attack. The energy bolt slammed the little electric type back and onto the poolside walk. Ash gasped in fear and concern. Oh, Misty's surprise, he actually jumped across several platforms to get closer to his friend. Pikachu, are you alright? Pikachu chew, Pika Pie, I'll make it, Ash, Pikachu replied, staggering to his feet. Water gun, Misty ordered. To me, Ash shouted. Pikachu leapt into the air and jumped into his trainer's arms. Starmie instinctively tracked his opponent and Misty watched with horror as the water jet, capable of knocking something as big as a Machamp across an arena, tracked onto her fragile friend. Still carrying Pikachu, Ash leapt wildly out of the way of the water jet and landed hard on another platform. Dropping low and onto all fours, he seemed to fall, but then was back on his feet. Misty realized that he had kept his joints loose, using them to absorb most of the impact of the jump. Ash pointed to the right and Pikachu jumped onto another platform. Ash looked at Misty in a calculating way before he ordered Pikachu to fire another Thunder Shock. Misty ordered Starmie into the air, avoiding the searing attack barely in time. She had to end this right now, before Ash, in his fearless courage, injured himself. Starmie, Body Slam. Ash tracked the twirling water type as he zipped through the air towards Pikachu. Pikachu, Agility up, he ordered at the last moment. Pikachu leapt into the air, dodging Starmie's attack. The starfish-like Pokémon shot past in a dive and crashed into the pool. Now, Thunderstorm, Ash ordered. Pikachu leapt into the air just as Starmie surfaced. Pika Pika Pikachu, Pikachu shouted, launching his most powerful attack into the pool. There was a hiss and a scent of ozone. The pool actually heated up by 2 degrees and electricity sparked around every metal fitting. There was a long pause and then Starmie bobbed to the surface, comatose. Misty gasped out a long-held breath and recalled her defeated friend. Pikachu Kachu, Pika Pie. I did it, Ash. Pikachu squealed in delight. He threw himself into Ash's arms and hugged his face excitedly. Yeah, you did, pal. Ash laughed. You were great, Misty, just great. Thanks for treating me as a normal person. Misty sighed and jumped across the platforms over to Ash. But you're not normal, Ash, she said. Ash looked at her in some concern as she joined him on the big Challenger's platform. You are far more than that. I don't believe that I am saying this, but you are one of the best trainers I've ever seen. And you, well, you have earned this. Misty reached into her belt bag and pulled out a crystal teardrop-shaped badge. For defeating me and showing such a love for your Pokémon. You have proved yourself worthy of the Cascade badge, she announced quietly. Congratulations, brother trainer. She shook her head. Now I want you to promise me you will never pull else such a stupid stunt as jumping in between 2 fighting Pokémon ever again. Ash laughed and Misty shook her head in disbelief. How did you do it, anyway? She asked. I thought I had you figured out. I thought so too, Ash replied. So I deliberately let you continue using melee attacks to draw Starmie into a position where Pikachu's electric attacks couldn't miss. Misty shook her head in amazement. I always have been good at that sort of stuff. Ash added modestly. He then touched his lower left leg and grimaced. Now I think we'd better go to the hospital. I think I've got a hairline fracture or two from my acrobatics. Misty offered her friend her shoulder to lean on as she led him away. She was worried, but she showed him the respect he deserved by not panicking, not fussing and treating him as normal. Whatever that was. Viridian City General Hospital. June 16, 2063. Misty remembered that day, and she recalled the change in Ash's attitude towards her in the days that followed. If, before, he wanted to avoid any mention of his disease with them, now he wanted them, her especially, to know everything about it. She was thankful for the trust that Ash had in her now. In a turn she had tried to treat him with the respect she felt he deserved. If she did bop him over the head with her mallet every now and again, it was only because his skull was thicker than the doctors insisted. She also had a nickname of her own for him, although she would never tell him that. Mr. Crystal, was how she thought of him. Fragile his body might be, but inside he was a beautiful thing, and in the right circumstances he was unbreakable. Ash was looking at his doctors with his blue and brown gaze. He was still talking about the proposed treatment for his injuries. And in the worst case? He asked. After a long pause. Dr. Cook gave his reply in a reluctant tone of voice. In the worst case, the bones have been so badly damaged that even the nanorobots cannot consolidate their cells enough to sustain your body. You can be forced to use crutches at the very least, more probably wheelchairs and orthopedical supports for the rest of your life. Cook took a deep breath. He did. Like giving his patients such terrible prognoses, but the boy's mother had agreed that her son should hear the whole truth. The stern, mature way that Ash looked at him guaranteed his respect and his desire to be open with his patient. Mr. Ketchum, you must understand that there is a definite probability that you could never live a completely independent life again. The doctor's words cut in to their hearts with all the force of a jackhammer. Everybody looked nervously at the silent boy in the bed, waiting for his reaction. Then Ash spoke, in a curiously controlled and detached tone. Thank you for telling me the truth, Doctor. He said. The rain began to get heavier. Some minutes passed, while Misty and Brock, together with Pikachu and Chikorita, attempted to encourage Ash. Delilah and Samuel Oak went to one side to talk with the doctors. Mrs. Ketchum, we still have to talk about the psychological therapy. Dr. Wiggins said calmly. Psychological therapy. Yes, you should remember that curing the body is just half of the battle, in a case like this. The most important part is also to cure the wounds that the attack inflicted to your son's mind. Delilah Ketchum remembered he nightmare that Ash had the previous night. Sure, she said quietly. Go ahead with it. Thank you very much for your permission. The geneticist said sincerely. She knew how much the structural engineer hated not be able to do anything to help the son to deal with the osteogenesis imperfecta, especially because the poor woman always thought that it was her fault. The incredible problem solving mind of the woman who created the Lugia Bridge must feel so utterly helpless in the face of something her buildings and machines could not defeat. Later, she telephoned Saffron City, calling Dr. Ben Goff. He was a psychologist who specialized in post-traumatic stress. His work on helping young Sabrina Bowman, the local gym leader and the world's only proven human telepsychic, come to terms with her amazing powers was considered amongst the most incredible therapy ever attempted. Meanwhile, Drive. Rupertson was informed that the hospital had a very low stock of blood type O negative, the SAM blood that ran in Ash's veins and arteries. It seemed that, genetically, the whole of Ash's biology seemed to be conspiring against him. There were alternatives to using human blood, but in Ash's perilous position, Drive. Rupertson was wary of even thinking of using them. Edward Jenner Building. June 16, 2063. While Drive. Rupertson explained the case, two people observed the doctor-patient discussion. From a dark room in the building in the other side of the street. What are they saying? The woman asked, bored. The man was observing the patient through his electronic telescope and listening in on the conversations in the room using a laser microphone. He grinned sadistically when he looked at his partner. He will spend a minimum of 9 months in the hospital. She smiled back, a smile similar to that of an Ekans or an Arbok. Then he is out of the Pokemon League. Sure, even if he recovers, what is almost impossible, there won't be time for him to work out for the next year global championship. Something that little freak of nature deserves very much, she laughed. She rose of the sofa and went to the room's small refrigerator. She caught 2 wine cups and filled it with cheap champagne. The 2 observers toasted. After a while, the man jerked his chin at the hellish device he had just finished assembling. All the same, I think it is a pity that we can't use our little toy. Who knows? Maybe the boss changes his mind and let us finish the job. There was a crash of thunder and the darkened room was strobe lit with the blue white of thunder. The observers in the shadows laughed. Viridian City Pokemon Center. June 16, 2063. A strong white-haired man walked through the corridors of the Pokemon Center. He was talking urgently into his mobile phone. And Tracy, forget to check the feeding of the Pokemon, okay? The automatic systems are good, but they are not foolproof. Yes, Professor, his assistant, Tracy Sketchit, replied. And could you please pee into the Ketchum's house and check the mail for Delilah? Sure. Professor. How is Ash? Professor Samuel Oak stopped in front of the door of his room, with a depressed expression on his face. He didn't notice the drops of water in front of the door. Not good, Tracy. Tracy nodded silently, tears threatening at the corner of his eyes, and cut the connection. When Oak entered in the dark room, he realized that he was not alone. The intruder, who clearly had not noticed him enter, was seated, in a chair, their back to him and wearing a black plastic hooded raincoat that made it impossible to identify who it was or even their gender. Oak closed the door and snatched up an umbrella as a makeshift weapon. Hey, who are you? He yelled. The woman in the black raincoat leapt to her feet in fear. Calm down, Sam. It's me, she yelled. Kim, he asked surprised. Kimberly Steeleon nodded sheepishly, removing her hood with her gloved hands. How did you get in here? And why are you here? To answer the first question, I asked Nurse Joy to let me wait for you in your room. Kimberly grinned in a mischievous way that took 10 years off of her age. There has to be some advantages to being the league Grand Master. She seemed embarrassed for a moment and became serious again. To answer your other question, I came because I needed talk with you. Could we leave the center and talk? Samuel Oak noticed the seriousness in her face. He opened the door of his room. Sure, he said, let's go. The researcher and the trainer left the Pokemon Center and walked out to Viridian City Park. University of Saffron. Saffron City. June 16, 2063. In a smart private apartment, a heavily built man with blonde brown hair and deep blue eyes finished of arranging his suitcase. He had spent the morning, the entire afternoon and the beginning of the night reading a series of newspaper articles sent from Viridian City. More importantly, he had also been reading several medical treatises regarding a genetic disease that he had never heard before, osteogenesis imperfecta. But now he should know everything he could about it. Dr. Ben Goff checked the train ticket, kept in the pocket of his jacket, once more. Indigo Rail ticket. Line 369. Departure 8 p.m. Saffron City, Night Bell Station. Arrival 10:25 p.m. Viridian City, North Gate Station. This way he would arrive in Viridian City in time to find a room in a decent hotel. He would then see his new patient in tomorrow's morning. Dr. Goff still had half-hour before leaving his apartment near the College of Biology, Medicine and Psychology of the University of Saffron. He remembered the phone call from his good friend, the geneticist Drive. Brenda Wiggins. He had worked with Brenda before on some puzzling cases. The short red-haired doctor, who fitted into the maternal category in his view, had asked if he could take charge of the psychological support treatment of her patient, Pokemon trainer Ashithan Ketchum. The psychologist sighed. Like everybody on the continent, if not the planet, he knew about the attack against the young trainer who had been such a revelation in this year's Global League. He was more than able to imagine that the boy would need help. Especially after reading the medical articles on his condition. An attack like that could easily shatter the boy's ability to function in society. Such traumas led, all too easily, to total loss of trust in others, paranoia, even to psychosis in the most severe cases. The similar case of a certain Elijah Price late in the previous century was still taught in psychology schools. Dr. Goff wasn't a father or a family man, really, but he could not imagine how the boy's mother had ever permitted him to become a Pokémon trainer. Dr. Goff immediately shook his head, holding his left arm, which was visibly thinner than his right. No, he would not make the error of attempting to judge a case before even doing a preliminary session with the patient. At the beginning of the therapy of another famous patient of his, gym leader Sabrina Bowman, he had made that mistake. Unfortunately, he had allowed his prejudgment that Sabrina was hysterical, and that her claims to psychic abilities were impossible to appear in his conscious thoughts. The young woman demonstrated her telepathic abilities by pulling those thoughts out of his mind immediately, in demo. Nstrated her other skills by very nearly ripping his left arm out of its socket with her telekinetic powers. Sabrina eventually apologized to him, and the woman was one of his few real friends. But to this day, he could still feel the pain in his arm and the telepsychic's fierce mental voice announcing, "We shall see who is the hysteric, doctor." Still, one had to look at the benefits in any situation. Dr. Goff's trademark mischievous smile lit up the untidy apartment. His bad arm was the most accurate predictor of bad weather he had ever known. Dr. Goff looked at his watch. "Well, it would be better if I went to the station now," he decided. The doctor left his apartment, thinking that this case would be a real challenge. Viridian City Park, June 16, 2063. They walked side by side, a tall woman in a black raincoat and a strong man in a yellow raincoat. They were in Viridian City Park, walking close to Lake Starmie. Somehow they felt able to welcome the now soft rain. Kimberly Stilao, N and Samuel Oak had walked in silence since they left the Pokémon Center, each one alone their own thoughts. Finally, Kimberly broke the silence. "And how are your researches going?" she asked cordially. "They are going very well indeed," Professor Oak replied. "And the League administration?" They continued speaking about trivial things until they were ready to discuss the subject that had brought them here. It was then that she spoke, in a tone that showed that she didn't really want to ask. "Sam, how long have you known trainer Ash Ketchum?" Oak carefully cultivated his reputation of being absent-minded. It made dealing with students easier. However, he was no fool and he already had guessed that Ash was the reason why his erstwhile girlfriend had suddenly turned up for an informal chat. "Well, since he was born," he admitted. "His mother and I are friends, since at least 2044 I think, ever since she designed my laboratory." "Your laboratory?" she asked surprised. "Yes, she was the architect and chief engineer assigned to the project by the Department of Construction and Maintenance of UN Governing Council. You know that the United Nations has researched all of the work on Pokémon since the very beginning." "Yes, I know. Then you have know about the disease that the boy suffers from." She felt like an idiot for asking something obvious. He looked her direct in the eyes. "Yes," he confirmed. "And now I should ask, why are you asking about Ash?" Kim sighed, kicking a small stone. She could not lie to Sam Oak, not after all the amazing adventures they had enjoyed together in their adolescence. If there was one well-guarded secret in Indigo, it was the romantic relationship that the two of them had shared when they were young. After 3 years, their differing careers and goals drew them apart, but a strong friendship remained. Besides, she knew that if there is someone in who she could trust, it was her old friend, still the only man on Earth who knew the intimate secrets of her body. After a while, Kim was able to speak. "I don't know if Brock Harrison or Misty Williams have thought to tell you, Sam, but there will be a gym leaders emergency meeting tomorrow," she announced. "We're going to discuss a motion made by Giovanni. He has demanded the expulsion of your young friend from the league." The researcher's expression was a cross of incredulity and anger. "But that's absurd," he almost shouted. "Ash is one of the best trainers in the league. Suspending him would be the biggest and most pointless act of idiocy possible." "Calm down," she exclaimed, her voice suddenly filled with the authority her position gave her. However, she couldn't really blame him for his reaction. After all, deep inside, she agreed with him. "Let's go there." She indicated a small bar, called the Night Umbreon. They entered and they sat down in a table in the most private part of the establishment. After a few drinks, the flush of anger finally left Sam's face. He looked at his glass, embarrassed by his explosion. "Kim, excuse me," he said gently. I was furious with the idea of somebody pulling the rug from under Ash's feet like that. Giovanni hasn't even given the boy the courtesy of allowing him to defend himself. I understand. She smiled and placed her gloved right hand over his. Let me guess, she continued gently, you two are very close friends, right? Sam Oak sighed. I believe so, yes, he said. Delilah, that's Ash's mother, said once that I was like a surrogate father for him. I feel honored that she thinks that of me. His eyes showed a glint of rage. Especially considering that Ash's biological father simply ran away when the poor lad was born. The imbecile simply abandoned her and she had to take care of Ash alone. It must have been hard for her. Kimberly commented. You can't even imagine what she went through every minute of her life from then on, Sam said, his eyes losing focus as the memories rose up. You saw in her eyes that she blamed herself for the disease that afflicted her son. She did everything in her power to help him to live a normal life. She did incredible things, miracles. She adapted the house, the car. That special sleeping bag and the armored arm and shin pads Ash wears were her design. When she had to travel to distant locations because of her work, she left Ash in my house. Nurse Joy from the Pallet Town Pokemon Center and I cared for him. Oak paused as one memory came to mind, one that, with the events of the last few days, had a frightening new significance. Once, when Ash was 6 years old, he broke both his legs when he fell from a tree. He was playing with my grandchildren, Gary and May, do you know them? Kim nodded. Of course, she only knew them as photos of babies and in her personal association with the Global League's most obnoxious trainer. Oak was continuing his story. While I examined Ash's legs with my Chansey, Delilah was trying to comfort him. The poor boy was crying so loudly, and who can blame him? Anyway, that was the first time I saw the despair under control look that she uses whenever Ash is hurt. Professor Oak was silent again, then continued in a hollow tone. Gary gave Ash a nickname after that day. Eventually it spread around all the children that knew him. Mr. Glass, they called him. Yes, I know all about that. Oak shot Kimberly a surprised look, so she explained. I was in the Masters box during a battle between Ash and Gary not too long ago, in the beginning of the Global League. I remember that he called Ash that name. But I didn't know why at the time. The researcher's face flushed with anger. After a few seconds, he exploded. I can't understand it, he snapped in a frustrated tone. I don't understand why Gary likes to humiliate Ash whenever he can. It is as if they were enemies, or something like that. He breathed deeply. Yet, when they were children, they would have died to protect each other. All this bitterness only came since they began their Pokemon journeys. The Grand Master spoke, carefully. Speaking of that, how did Ash get the permission for the journey? I mean, with his disease. Sam smiled at the friend. I understand what you want. You want me to give you the answers for the questions that the gym leaders could ask you tomorrow, right? Yes, she admitted with a resigned smile. You know me very well. Professor Samuel Oak remembered of when he had received the notice from the league certifying Ash as a novice trainer. Pallet Town Pokemon Research Center. Offices of Professor Samuel Oak. April 26, 2060. Professor Samuel Oak, responsible for the supply of the novice trainer's first Pokemon, looked in surprise at the document that he had in his hands. He also saved some surprise for the red-haired woman who was seated in front of his desk. Is there something wrong? Delilah Ketchum asked abruptly. No, it is just that I'm surprised. That's all. Surprised about what? Delilah asked in a frosty tone of voice. You know as well as I do that Ash dreams of being a Pokemon trainer. She said. I know. It's that. Oak's face flamed with embarrassment. He couldn't think of one tactful way he could explain his concerns. Delilah knew him too well, and proved it by finishing his protest for him. You think Ash could not stand the strain, she declared. Sam swallowed dryly. No, Delilah, he protested. I know that Ash will be a great trainer. The way that he interacts with the Pokemon here at the center proves that. It is just that, considering Ash's condition, it is a surprise that you have allowed him to do this. A lot of people would prevent him of going, Delilah finished, without caring if that would hurt him or not. Delilah jumped to her feet. She already was a tall woman, but in her anger she seemed to tower to the ceiling. Sam, I know that you worry about Ash. I thank you for that. But, please, understand. If I don't allow him to be what he wants to be, I will essentially be admitting to him that everything I have told him since he was a baby, that he is normal, is a lie, that I agree with what the people think of him. Her face darkened. With what his father thought of him. The researcher stared at his friend in silence. She sighed and she looked it directly in his eyes. And if I do that, I will do something worse than break his bones. I would break his soul. The Night Umbreon Bar. June 16, 2063. Well, after that, I couldn't think of a single reason for Ash not to have my permission to go on a journey. But Delilah and I were both aware that Ash would face special problems due to his condition, therefore we took some precautions. I managed to arrange it so that he could carry a medical Chansey, and I programmed a special warning in his Pokédex. Kimberly nodded. She could well imagine the torment that the boy's mother had experienced in making that decision. Or perhaps she could not imagine. She sounds a very brave woman, Sam. Yes, Sam admitted, his eyes lighting up with something that surprised Kimberly, but now was not the time or place to follow it. Ash is a chip off the old block. It is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. He seems to literally attract trouble out of thin air. Oak grinned at his old friend, a bit like you, Kim. She frowned at the true statement. But he isn't afraid. Not of pain, not of injury, not of anything. He is loyal and does not hesitate to face danger if he thinks it is necessary. You would be amazed at some of the stunts that he gets up to. If a friend of his is in danger, then he doesn't care if he could be hurt or not. He will try to help as much as he can. Forest between Pallet Town and Viridian City. May 1, 2060. Ash pedaled the fastest that he could, trying hold his Pikachu with his broken arm, while he held the handlebars of the bicycle belonging to that girl that he found by the river bank with the good arm. A strong pain filled Ash's entire body. The crazed screams of the wild Spearows closing in from behind didn't make him feel any better. His only thought was to get to Viridian City the fastest possible. A sudden rush of wind over feathers made him realize even that wish wasn't going to be fulfilled. One of Spearows collided with his shoulder, jolting Ash's fractured arm. The universe too. RNED into an explosion of pain that sent Ash and Pikachu tumbling from the bicycle. In the fall, Ash broke his remaining arm and snapped 2 ribs on his right side. But in that moment, all his attention was centered on the wounded Pokémon at his side. Pikachu. No, this can't be happening. He murmured. He approached his small friend. I won't let anything to happen you, please, trust me. He couldn't believe that he had failed so utterly with his first Pokémon. The small electric mouse watched the human. He was unable to equate the young male's actions with how he had always believed humans should act. He is injured so very severely, and yet still he concerns himself with me. Pikachu thought in a dazed way. Ash pulled out his one Pokeball and begged Pikachu to enter it. Then it was too late. He heard the birds returning. Spearow. Spearow. As if that was a signal, Ash's face twisted with fury and determination. Painfully, he stood up and opened his broken arms, trembling with pain. In a desperate attempt to protect Pikachu. Spearows. Do you know WHOIAM? He screamed at the flying-type Pokémon. I am Ash Ketchum, of Pallet Town. Ash was perfectly aware this was insane, but he had to do something. I will defeat and capture you all. Then, the anger that he felt suddenly exploded out in an impossible challenge. Come and get me. The electric Pokémon observed this confrontation with horror. His trainer could not survive an assault by the Spearows in his current state. In a single moment of decision, he made a choice that determined his destiny and that of Count Telis others. The human had earned his trust and friendship, now he had to do something. Pikachu scaled Ash's back and leapt off of his shoulder, jumping in direction of the birds. Before Ash could understand what was happening, Pikachu threw the most potent attack he had ever attempted. Pikachu. It was really just a standard, Thunder Shock, attack, but its intensity was orders of magnitude greater than the tiny animal ought to be able to generate. The massive discharge knocked down all the Spearows, and utterly destroyed the girl's bike in the process. There was a sudden silence on the world. The thunderstorm had cleared and the sun was daring to peek out of the clouds. A drained and exhausted Pikachu pulled himself over to Ash and touched his nose to his hand. It was an ancient act. One as old as the association between Pokémon and human. It meant, you are my trainer. Ash smiled at his friend. We did it. He murmured quietly. It is then he remembered Chansey. He activated the medical Pokeball. Chansey. My word, I must get those fractures set. Chansey, I want you to treat Pikachu first, Ash ordered. Chansey looked up at Ash in some surprise. Chansey and C, Ash, you must be in agony. Let me help you, she protested. After you have treated Pikachu, Ash repeated, his face twisted with pain and exasperation at her daring to question his commands in that exact moment. Chansey looked up at the being she was charged to keep healthy. Finally she sighed and turned to the drained electric type that had collapsed in Ash's arms. While Ash waited, he looked up at the clearing sky. Before he fainted, he saw something amazing, something beyond wonder. A golden bird like a beautiful peacock flew across a magical rainbow towards the horizon, trailing golden sparkles of power behind it. Ash never decided if it was a hallucination brought on by pain, but he was sure he saw the creature look at him and heard it speak. Ho-oh. Ho-ho-oh-oh-ho. The Night Umbreon Bar. June 16, 2063. Kimberly Steeleon, the Grand Master of the Pokémon League sat there, her mouth hanging open in a most undignified way. He really did that? She asked, her voice risen to a squeak. Yes, Sam confirmed, the automatic recording system of the Pokédex doesn't lie. The automatic recording system, or ARS, was a kind of black box for trainers. It recorded everything that happened to a trainer and his Pokémon for the last 15 days. It was an excellent way to discover if the trainer abused his Pokémon. Oh, to discover one of most heroic gestures that a trainer could do. Wow, Professor Oak agreed. That says a lot about him, doesn't it? In his view, in that day of May of 2060, Ash passed with honors and his first endurance test as a Pokémon trainer and no one could deny it. He even thought in tell her the adventure in Shamuti Island, but he decided against it. Even he still had difficulties to belly. Eve that Ash traveled in the back of the legendary beast of the sea, Lugia, and he was an eyewitness of the event. Yes, she couldn't understand why anyone would want to suspend a trainer that took such a risk like that for his Pokémon. The two people were in silence for some time. Kimberly Steeleon's mind was processing everything Sam had told her. She already knew that the experience evils of Ash Ketchum's Pokémon was astonishing, especially if one considered that he had only captured some of them less than a year ago. All right, he had just short of 60 Pokémon, a laughable number for a global league trainer. Of which 25 were a herd of Tauros, but their quality more than compensated for the low number. She had also learnt that the young trainer had a great preference for ranged attacks. This was easy to understand given what Sam had told her. By using that type of attack, Ash decreased the chance of his Pokémon being hurt in a battle. It might also explain why he only had one fighting type. His rarely seen Primeape. She had made her decision. Kimberly looked up into Samuel Oak's eyes. Sam, I have only a limited influence in this matter. Ash's fate will be decided by a vote of all the gym leaders. But you can be sure that I will do everything I can to stop them from suspending his license. Thank you, Kim. The two old friends left the bar together and walked back to the Pokémon Center. As they parted, Kimberly looked Sam in the eyes. Do you love her, Sam? She asked. Oak blinked in surprise. Love who, Kim? He blurted. Kimberly laughed. The next time you talk about Delilah Ketchum, see if you can catch your expression in a mirror, she said. She winked at him, leaned forward and kissed him on the cheek. Until the next battle, brother trainer, she said. Sam stood there for a long time, watching Kimberly Steeleon disappear into the rain. Her black clothes made that happen more quickly. Odd how she always wore black these days. After a moment, he turned to enter the center. He hoped that tomorrow brought some good news for his friend in the hospital. Pokémon Global League Headquarters. June 17, 2063. Brock Harrison, Boulder Badge, and Mist. Y. Williams, Cascade Badge, observed the movement in the main room of the building, trying to get the feel of the gathering besides the atmosphere of tension that seemed physical enough to cut. Jim Lee. Durs of the Pokémon Global and Regional Leagues attended and several of them looked discreetly at Brock and Misty, as if they were from another planet. Now I know how the Clefairies feel. Brock thought. Others asked how Ash was doing and asked to pass on their best wishes for a fast recovery to the trainer. Among these were Lieutenant Robert Lyman Surge, the Vermilion City Gym Leader Indigo League Luana Scanlon, the Kumquat Island Gym Leader Orange League, and Whitney Miller, the Goldenrod City Gym Leader Johto League. Misty smiled when she remembered how poor Ash had almost died from embarrassment. When Luana hugged him on that beach, thinking that he was her son, Travis. She had never seen Ash so totally frozen in shock as in that moment. The last gym leaders to come arrived for the emergency meeting. There was a sudden whoosh of displaced air and a tall woman with dark green hair and blue eyes materialized in the middle of the room. She was the Saffron City Gym Leader, Sabrina Bowman. Brock and Misty became nervous when the telepsychic woman approached them. With her serious face, they remembered how rare it was to see her smile. Their nervousness was understandable. Both remembered the pain and fear when she used her astounding abilities to turn them into dolls, playthings for her amusement. Misty didn't know what to expect, but Sabrina surprised them both. "How is Ash?" she asked, in a concerned tone. Hearing of the murderous assault on the boy had affected her in ways she had not expected. There were just two people in the whole world that she could thank for saving her from falling into the abyss of madness she had been digging for herself, and they were Ash Ketchum and Dr. Ben Goff. Recovering, Brock answered. He didn't want to speak more Han absolutely necessary about his friend's condition. Was he badly wounded? Why doesn't that psychic bitch just suck the information out of our heads? Misty thought angrily, and immediately censured herself for such thoughts. She's concerned, Misty, give her the credit for that and showing enough respect for us to ask us rather than simply taking what she wanted. I deserve your enmity, Misty, a voice suddenly said in Misty's head. Misty turned her surprised gaze to the gently smiling Sabrina. But, please, trust me now. I am no longer your enemy. He will have to stay in hospital for at least 9 months. Brock said matter-of-factly. There was a long, shocked silence among the gym leaders surrounding Brock and Misty. Misty looked at the clock. There were still 15 minutes to go until the scheduled beginning of the meeting. In that moment, Giovanni Carpenter, the Viridian City Gym Leader, entered, accompanied by his deputy, Amanda Blackstone, as always in her black leather armor. Brock noticed that a small, cold smile was on Giovanni's lips. There was something about Giovanni's whole demeanor that made Brock come out in a cold sweat. Others gym leaders noticed that too. They all knew that there was something a little rotten about that smile. At 1 o'clock, Elite Four member and Global League Company Ordinators Council member, the Water and Ice Pokemon Specialist T. Rainer Lorelei Taylor opened the doors of the auditorium, summoning them for the meeting. All 117 gym leaders entered. Viridian City General Hospital. June 17, 2063. Dr. Ben Goff was going in direction of the 8th floor. After speaking with the doctors responsible for the physical treatment of his new patient, they wanted to give him the clearest impression of what the trainer had suffered with the attack and what his current physical condition was. They wanted prepare the psychologist for what he would see in room 814. His old friend, Drive, Brenda Wiggins, walked beside him. They arrived at T. He room and they asked to Officer Jenny to call Ash's mother. She appeared in the door of the room and the psychologist and the patient's mother looked at each other for the first time. Mrs. Ketchum, this is Dr. Ben Goff, Drive, Wiggins said in her cheerful voice. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Ketchum, Drive, Goff said with his best professional smile. He offered his hand and noted that Delilah Ketchum did not immediately accept it. Hello, Doctor, Delilah said calmly. Dr. Wiggins has said a lot of good things about you. Dr. Goff watched Delilah and decided that she was studying him carefully, evaluating if she could entrust her son's safety to him. He had already seen that glance several times during his work. Whatever Delilah saw must have satisfied her, because she shook his hand and offered him a tired smile. He entered in the room where the patient awaited, immobilized in his bed. The psychologist managed to hide his astonishment when he saw his state. The briefings could not They prepared him for the sheer horror of Ash Ketchum's condition. Surrounded by bone casts, orthopedical braces and life support machinery and with strips of bandages covering his face, he resembled a robot with a mummy face rather than a human being. The strange brown-on-blue eyes turned to observe him. Hello, Ash answered. The voice was just a whisper. Hello, Mr. Ketchum. I'm Drive, Ben Goff. Through the bandages, drive. Goff saw the attempt at a wry smile. Excuse me for not getting up to shake your hand, Ash said quietly. Doctor. Goff noticed that Ash's hands were encased in special orthopedical gloves. The boy was more a collection of surgical appliances than a person right now. That's all right, he replied gently. Doctor. Goff sat down in a chair close to the door and spent a moment gathering his thoughts. Now the most difficult part in any course of therapy was upon him, to open the conversation and build the critical bond of trust with his patient. Ben observed Ash's eyes, they had a gleam of maturity that surprised him. I have to remember that he is much maturer than his age would normally allow, he thought. He took a second to consider the huge amount of surgical intervention onto the patient's body and the near-toxic level of painkillers being pumped into his body. Brenda told him that, although this was an extreme case, Ash had been in hospital for 4 of his 13 years. The suffering involved beggared the imagination. Yes, the boy is mature, he reflected, but he has to be. Pokémon League Main Auditorium. June 17, 2063. Kimberly Steelion, the Grand Master of the Pokémon League, appeared in front of the stage. At her side were her 4 champions, the Elite Four, Lorelei Taylor, Bruno Sexton, Agatha Cassini and Lance Silver. Kimberly breathed deeply and Hen began her opening statement. I thank you for your presence and your effort to attend this gym leaders emergency meeting. The subject, due to recent events, is of the most extreme importance. We are here to discuss a proposal made by Viridian City gym leader, Giovanni Carpenter. He moves for the suspension of Pokémon trainer Ash Ethan Ketchum's trainer's license. The auditorium was filled with whispered exclamations of astonishment, making it impossible for her to continue. She saw that gym leaders Williams and Harrison were angry, as were many other gym leaders from Indigo, Orange and Johto. Given Ash's popularity, Kimberly had anticipated this reaction. What puzzled her was Lance's reaction. The dragon-type trainer's expression remained a mask of neutrality. This was unusual, as Lance hated Giovanni with a passion and would normally oppose any motion originated by the Viridian City gym leader on that basis alone. Think about it later, Kimberly advised herself. Acting as chairman, she recognized Giovanni so that he could make a statement explaining and justifying his motion. The gym leaders in the first row noticed the short poisonous glance exchanged between gym leader and Grand Master. Everybody knew about the rivalry among the 2 greatest Pokémon trainers of their generation, and possibly any generation, and that was a rivalry with its origin in a battle that took place a long time ago. Indigo Pokémon League Stadium, Indigo Plateau, October 20, 2017. Okay, the referee has confirmed the outcome, the commentator told the enthusiastic capacity crowd at Plateau Stadium. Giovanni Carpenter's Jolteon has beaten Kimberly Steelion's Gloom. That leaves the score tied as we go into the final bout. Everything is up for grabs here, ladies and gentlemen. Whoever wins this bout will be the League Supreme Champion for 2017. At the green end of the arena, a red-haired 14-year-old girl stared at the scoreboard, which read, Carpenter 2-2 Steelion. Kimberly sucked in her breath and looked at the 19-year-old man with the slicked-back black hair and the arrogant smile standing at the red end of the arena. Trainer Giovanni Carpenter smirked and shouted out to his opponent. And so, little girl. Do you want to give up? No way. Kimberly Steelion answered with complete certainty. On a whim, she pulled her black league cap down and reversed its brim. She sounded confident, but she knew she was in a weak position. Giovanni still had 3 Pokémon strong enough to fight, a Venusaur, a Rhydon, and an Arcanine. She only had a choice left, Magna, her Magneton. She drew in a breath and awaited his choice, knowing that he also knew of his advantage. Go Rhydon. A massive rhino-like Pokémon appeared. She closed her eyes. Giovanni was no idiot, and he had chosen the one Pokémon that gave him a massive advantage. Rhydon was a rock type and rock is strong against electricity. I choose you, Magna. She shouted. The bio-robot, IC Pokémon materialized and floated forward to take its place at the starting circle. The whole world seemed to hold its breath for a moment, then a loud siren blared, the last bout was on. Rhydon, horn attack. Rhydon lowered his impressive armored head and charged right at Magna, his quartz crystal horn rotating like a massive power drill. Magna, dodge. Up. The magneton jumped upward 30 feet. But the fast-moving Raiden only missed it by a few inches. Kimberly decided not to give her opponent a chance to respond. Magna. Sonic boom. Mag. Nay. Tune. The magnetic Pokémon emitted a powerful sound, similar to the huge displacement of air created when an aircraft went through the sound barrier. The massive sonic pulse caused the rock K-type Pokémon to vibrate at its resonant frequency, disrupting its nervous system. Simultaneously, the shock wave of air blew it off of its feet. Kimberly and Giovanni were both knocked back too. Wow! Kimberly muttered in amazement. Magna obviously had felt its trainer's urgency. He had never put so much into an attack before. Giovanni sprang to his feet, his fists clenched. Raiden, get up, damn you! He shouted. The rock type staggered and managed to get onto its feet, glaring at Magna in fury. About time, Giovanni shouted. Now, Omni Blast. But before the Raiden could comply, Kimberly used a special trick she and Magna had worked on for years. Magna, Thunder Wave. Magna released a massive wave of electrostatic charge that washed over Raiden, shorting out its nervous system and making it twitch and howl in pain. It wasn't enough to stop one of the powerful rock-type Pokémon, but the attack wasn't over yet. Zap Cannon. Kimberly yelled. Tune, Magna shouted. This was the final part of the move. Magneton launched a beam of electromagnetic force from its central eye. The force beam struck Raiden and blew the creature back into the far wall of the arena. The dust settled and Raiden was still embedded into the concrete, its eyes crossed over in a strangely comical way. Giovanni could only look on in disbelief. He had lost to that little girl. The referee's verdict was a formality. Raiden cannot continue, he announced as a crane moved forward to dig the rock type loose. Bout and match, Magneton and Kimberly Steelion. The crowd went wild. They loved the style and odds-defying nature of this victory. For decades, the last bout of Carpenter vs. Steelion 2017 would be known as the David against Goliath bout. Kimberly ran onto the arena and hugged tightly her robotic Pokémon, who blushed, although how it did this, no one knows. She barely heard the announcer's voice. Kimberly Steelion of Celadon City becomes the supreme champion of the 2017 Pokémon League. Quote, Pokémon League Main Auditorium, July 17, 2063. As Giovanni made his speech, Misty and Brock's blood seethed with rage. Due to the fact that the Pokémon League UE cannot take the responsibility for trainers who are irresponsible with his or her own health. I ask you, my friends, how can we entrust a Pokémon, one of the deadliest and most powerful creatures in creation, to someone whose bones break for no reason at all, or to someone whose actions are, for any practical purposes, attempted suicide? Quote, The original certification of Ash Ketchum's license can be considered primarily an act of charity. One cannot truly expect that someone suffering from such a grave medical condition can possibly perform in a manner worthy of our august and respected league. Quote, Due to that it should be considered in the best interests of the league, and of Mr. Ketchum, to immediately suspend his license as Pokémon trainer for an indefinite period. At this point, the audience was divided. Many agreed with Giovanni's arguments, but his arguments were facing an almost ferocious opposition from the gym leaders that had faced Ash. They all knew that what Giovanni was saying was nonsense. The boy was no more disabled than any one of them. Sabrina had watched Giovanni's presentation like an Arbic about to pounce on a Rattata. When the Viridian City gym leader sat down, she spoke without bothering to ask permission. So, Mr. Carpenter, she remarked, if I am correct, you are proposing to suspend Trainer Ketchum's license on the grounds that he has a genetic abnormality that makes it unsafe to allow him to continue in the league. Am I correct? Giovanni frowned suspiciously at the Saffron City gym leader for a long moment before answering. Yes, Ms. Bowman, that is correct, he said. Is there any indication, apart from some brief spells of hospital treatment, that the trainer's condition in any way negatively affects his performance? Sabrina asked pleasantly. Well, Giovanni scowled at his notes. He felt a tingling in his head, telling him that Sabrina was reading them too, through his eyes. I see, not, Sabrina said. You know, Ner Ketchum and I are much alike in many ways. We both suffer from a curse, not of our choosing, caused by random genetic mutation. He has fragile bones, and I must live with the constant babble of other persons' thoughts in my mind. He breaks his bones so easily, and I must continually fight madness. Surely you should also propose my own removal from the leadership of my gym." Giovanni pursed his lips. Sabrina was a well-respected and even a much-loved gym leader, to even suggest it would invite scorn. "Your cases are entirely different," he replied at last, his voice low and angry. Ash Ketc. Hum is in constant danger of disabling injury and death, from which we have a moral duty to protect him. "I can testify that Ash is more than capable of protecting himself," Sabrina replied, earning nods and grins from many gym leaders who had faced the boy. What is more, the only time he has ever experienced injuries serious enough to threaten his life is after he has been assaulted by Team Rocket. Sabrina smiled gently at Giovanni. "I am sure you will agree that any trainer would be at risk of serious injury or death under those circumstances." Giovanni looked up sharply. Was it possible that she knew? He asked himself. No. His researchers promised that the anti-psychic training he had received would prevent that witch from learning his secrets in a casual contact, and she would never initiate a deep scan without his permission in front of so many witnesses. In summary, Sabrina concluded, "I, for one, find this motion to be without merit. I would therefore like to make a counter proposal, that this motion be stricken from the record of the League and that Giovanni Carpenter be censured in the strongest terms for wasting the time of this body on this nonsense." There was a dangerous pause. Giovanni went bright red with fury and lunged to his feet. "That is outrageous," he snapped. After a moment, he regained control. "As you will be aware, my friends, Ms. Bowman's UE perspective has blinded her to reality in more than one occasion in the past," he said in a snide tone of voice. "She should be forgiven if the psychic impression of the Ketchum boy's suicidal deed. RMI Nation has made it impossible for her to make an objective assessment of this matter." Giovanni's arguments took on an air of oratory. Ms. Bowman's arguments are based on emotion and subjective impressions and, frankly, she is. Giovanni paused and cleared his throat. Sabrina's expression had not changed, but Misty saw hardness in the young woman's eyes. "She is as incapable." Giovanni's eyes bulged. The veins on the side of his head began to stick out. He started making a choking noise and he fiddled with the collar of his shirt. There was a tension in the auditorium. Sabrina had half raised her right arm, her hand open as if holding something. "I find your lack of faith disturbing," she told Giovanni in a dangerously pleasant tone of voice. There was a heaviness about the air that made everyone feel utterly terrified. No one seemed inclined to interfere with whatever the telepsychic gym leader was doing. Even Amanda leaned away from her gym leader, her normally pale face now white with terror. Giovanni was going purple now, not with rage but with asphyxia. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down as he tried to breathe and sweat began to bead his forehead. "Sabrina." Kimberly Stelion snapped. "Yes, Kimberly." Sabrina asked pleasantly. "Release him. Immediately." Sabrina shrugged and lowered her hand. "As you wish." Giovanni collapsed onto his knees and he could only kneel there for a moment, gasping for breath. Amanda rushed over and helped him to his feet. Everyone noticed that he never looked Sabrina in the eye ever again. "Well, ladies and gentlemen, if we have finished squabbling and hurling insults like first-year novices," Kimberly said coldly, "then we can proceed with this meeting in a civilized manner." She drew in a deep breath. Misty lifted her arm to request permission to speak. "The chair recognizes Cerulean City Gym Leader, Misty Williams," Kimberly announced. Before that the orange-haired girl could open her mouth, Giovanni loudly protested that her opinion could not be considered due to her well-documented emotional involvement with the trainer in question. Misty's face darkened with rage and she turned to face Giovanni, and her all-too-obvious outrage caught Kimberly's attention. She decided to intervene before Misty said what she really thought of the Earth Gym Leader, and here Kimberly had to restrain a grin. Sabrina finally lost her temper and crushed Giovanni's windpipe like a cardboard tube. Fortunately, her voice had a lot of natural authority that caught everyone's attention. "I believe that Miss Williams and Mr. Harrison's opinions should be considered very carefully in this case. Please remember, my friends, that we are forming our opinion from a position outside the reality of this case. However, the gym leaders of Pewter and Cerulean cities live with Mr. Ketchum, and they can offer us personal testimony regarding his safety and about his performance. You will recall that the only issues that Mr. Carpenter has raised concern are Mr. Ketchum's safety during his Pokémon journeys and the quality of his participation in the league. Several gym leaders agreed, some emphatically, others with doubt. However, being Grand Master had a lot of powers. And one of them was that she decided how these meetings proceeded. And no one else. Misty gestured to Brock to speak for her. She had not calmed down enough yet to defend Ash in a coherent way. The Boulder Gym leader began to speak. Well, as the Grand Master suggests, I would like to discuss the points that Mr. Carpenter mentioned. Firstly, he said that Ash could not perform well in the league due to his disease. However, if Mr. Carpenter chose to examine the league's own ranking, he would have seen that Ash is statistically one of the best trainers of recent times. Brock struck the cushion of the chair in front of him for emphasis as he continued. Ash reached in 16th place in the Indigo League of 2060, the first year of his journey. He was the Orange League E champion in 2061 and of the Johto League champion in 2062. Besides these facts, he has obtained all the necessary badges to be accepted in these competitions, as several gym leaders here present can confirm. Brock made a gesture in the direction of the audience. Including your Earth badge, your SOB. Misty thought, looking daggers at the man with slicked back black hair sitting on the stage. The murmurs became stronger as the gym leaders absorbed these facts. Secondly, Mr. Carpenter argues that Ash is irresponsible. Brock laughed in an ironic way. Well, I won't deny that he has led Misty and me into several pretty dangerous situations. But I can assure you all that he is not irresponsible. He is perfectly aware of his disease and its consequences for his health. He is simply determined not to allow his condition to control his life. Brock breathed in deeply. Finally, Mr. Carpenter argues that we can't trust Ash with a Pokémon. Well, Ash Ketchum shows more respect and love for his Pokémon than any other trainer I know does. He never forces them to fight, to evolve or do things that don't want, and he never keeps them if they want their freedom. He worries deeply about them. And he will do everything to his reach to prevent them from being hurt, and if that doesn't show that he is a great trainer, I don't know what will. In the beginning, Brock's defense of Ash had been calm and controlled. But in the end, his revulsion with the whole situation had become very clear. He sat down, exhausted, and Misty smiled at her friend in pride. Silence reigned in the auditorium for a long minute before Misty spoke up. If I remember, she said, the whole reason for becoming a Pokémon trainer is to prove, to yourself and others, that you can transcend your limitations and be the very best. Like no one ever was. Kimberly Steeleon smiled when Misty recited the first two stanzas of the Pokémon trainer's oath. I believe that we can vote the motion now. Brock had he feeling that the Grand Master had smiled and winked at them. Viridian City Pokémon Center. June 17, 2063. Misty badly could contain her happiness. He lost, she exclaimed to Professor Oak. Giovanni's motion was defeated. All thanks to Brock. He seemed like a lawyer from those old movies, who proves the innocence of his client and gets the bad guy to confess on the witness stand. The Pewter City gym leader blushed. Misty hadn't told the complete truth. The final vote had been a very close call. 56 votes in favor of the expulsion of Ash Ketchum from the league, 58 votes against it. Abstentions: Misty Williams, Brock Harrison and Giovanni Carpenter, for the obvious reasons. You should have seen the face that Giovanni made when the Grand Master read out the verdict. She still laughed. Sam Oak could imagine the indignation that arrogant imbecile had felt very well. And he smiled because of that, wishing that he had seen it. Please tell me that you took a picture, he said with a grin. They all laughed at Professor Oak's joke. Well, the important is that now there is nothing to worry Ash. Brock said, completing. Beyond making sure he recovers soon, I mean. Edward Jenner Building. June 17, 2063. The man and the woman that were observing Ash's hospital room were looking at each other with bored expressions when the telephone rang. It was the end of the afternoon, and EY had expected their sponsor to contact them at this time. As expected, no face appeared on the screen, only an electronically distorted masculine voice that spoke the words they had hoped to hear. You can continue. The payment is already in your account. The man smiled at his partner and informed her about the order. They smiled at the device close to the window. Viridian City General Hospital, June 17, 2063. Dr. Ben Goff sat in the doctor's ready room, writing up his notes of the first interview that he had with his patient. "What kind of doctor are you?" Ash asked. He imagined that he was the doctor who would handle his nanorobotic therapy. "I'm a psychologist." Dr. Goff noticed that Ash was surprised. He continued, "They want to guarantee that you will be in good health when you begin the therapy, not just your body, but also your mind." "I understand." Ash should had expected that. They were silent for some time, evaluating each other. "So, are you a Pokemon trainer?" Ben asked. Sometimes asking the basic questions was the best way to begin a conversation. "Yes, for 3 years now." Ash's eyes were alert and Ben noticed the boy's passion for his profession. "Did you see a Pikachu and a Chikorita in the corridor?" "Yes, I saw them. They were sleeping outside in a sofa." "Are they yours?" "Yeah, they're my best Pokemon." "Were they okay?" The doctor thought a little. What he knew about Pokemon he could write in meter-high letters on the wall of a toilet cubicle. "Well, they seemed a little tired." "Yeah, Ben, that may have been something to do with them being asleep." Ash nodded. The psychologist didn't miss one reaction from his patient. His experience taught him that everything was important. He stored away Ash's responses and reactions for future analysis. "A doctor?" "Yes." He saw Ash form a smile. "Well, as I already spent more time in hospitals than I would like, I know that Dr. Wiggins and Dr. Rupertson would have already told you everything about me. It's the standard procedure. But I don't know anything about you." Ben laughed. "Fair enough. Where do I begin?" "Well, I'm 30 years old. I have doctorates in psychology and parapsychology from the University of Saffron. My psychology doctoral thesis was in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorders, but I've also done research into psychic phenomenon. I'm considered a competent doctor and my her insists that I can cook a decent pizza." He smiled. "What else?" "I like mid to late 20th century rock and roll. I read sci-fi and I love sci-fi and adventure films." He shrugged. "I never had a girlfriend. Never even had a serious relationship yet. Got a phobia about flying insects. Just your common or garden academic really." Ash laughed at the end of Ben's description. "Thank you for the information, doctor." "You are welcome." The psychologist looked at his patient's record again. "Your full name is Ash Ethan Ketchum. Is Ethan your father's name?" The smile disappeared from Ash's face for one moment before he answered. Ben picked that up immediately. He would later discover that Ash's birth certificate listed no father, something unheard of in this era of comprehensive DNA records and genetic medical treatment. "No, it is a homage to my mother's father." "To your grandfather?" Ash nodded again. "He was a jetliner pilot for Articuno Airlines. Ask any commercial pilot about Captain Ethan Robin Ketchum, and he will tell you everything about him. He was famous due to some miraculous feats that he accomplished with his airplanes." Later, Goff would return to that point. He had already noticed that Ash feared any reference to his own father. "Do you have a girlfriend?" he asked. Sigmund Freud still had a lot of influence on psychology. Ash's eyes widened with alarm and embarrassment at the question. "No. People say that Misty is my girlfriend, but she is just my friend." "Just that." "Of course, Ash," Ben replied in a soothing voice. "I've had that problem myself." "You are lying, kid, even to yourself." Ben thought and then wrote, "Classic early pubescent sexual, emotional denial," in his notes. Ash's eyes screamed that he liked the girl, far more than simple friendship. Then the doctor approached the subject of the Ash's condition. "Ash, if you don't mind me saying this, you seem remarkably calm about your situation. You almost seem resigned to your condition and the amount of pain and inconvenience it is causing you." Ash surprised him by laughing softly. "Hey, it isn't as if I have a choice," Ash commented with perfect calm. "Well, I was born with this, Doc. I cannot change it. My choice is either to simply lie around complaining or to live. I thought it was better to choose the second option." Given Ash's current state, his casual acceptance of his condition and its consequences was surprising. Indeed, it was abnormal. Ben had never seen an emotional pattern like this in the face of such an overwhelming physical handicap. He checked his notes again. Ash suffered from level 2 osteogenesis imperfecta. All the best doctors in the world insisted that he should be a decade dead and buried. The fact he was alive and active was a tribute to something unsuspected in that boy's head. Ben decided that, if he were to help the boy, he would have to find out exactly what it was. They talked for more 30 minutes before drive. Goff concluded the session with a promise to bring a few of his treasured Beatles CDs for Ash, who was curious about what kind of music was popular a century before. He noticed that Mr. Ketchum had the very complex personality under his easy-going external facade. This is going to be a long case, Ben thought. Still, today was not a bad start. He seems open enough and I've already identified several possible trauma ARIAs that might be connected with his case-specific amnesia. Suddenly the psychologist's head snapped up. He knew that sound only too well from his time working as a negotiator for the Saffron City Security Police. It was the sound of someone firing a high-powered rifle. Eldridge Avenue. June 17, 2063. Richie Trenton was with his girlfriend, Christine Weiss, going in direction of Viridian City General Hospital. He wanted to visit his friend Ash. He was laughing about an adventure that both had participated in during the Johto League last year, when he heard the shots. 3 shots. Soon after, pieces of broken glass had dropped into the street. Richie looked at the falling debris with an air of disbelief. He heard when somebody close to him shouted, "Look out! Some lunatic is shooting at the hospital." The Pokémon trainer and his girlfriend looked at each other. The hospital. Christine gasped. "Richie, you don't think?" "Ash," Richie murmured in concern. "Someone is trying to finish the job." They ran in direction to the hospital. Viridian City General Hospital. June 17, 2063. Dr. Ben Goff, running in the direction of the sound of the shots, realized that they came from the room 814. My God, he thought. He arrived on time of seeing the medical team racing out with the patient. Dr. Wiggins was kneeling over Ash's body performing CPR on the boy she had known from the moment of his birth. Ben saw that Ash was losing a lot of blood. It was running steadily from 3 holes in the metal orthopedical braces. "Ash!" Delilah Ketchum screamed as she ran in the direction of the doctors. Her face was pale. She had been in the room with her son, and her face and dress were splattered with his life's blood. My God, she must have seen everything. The psychologist thought, aghast at the level of trauma this must be causing the woman. Goff, hold her. Dr. Rupertson screamed. The psychologist seized the woman by her blouse. Delilah struggled like someone possessed, begging him to let her go. Ease down, Delilah, he said urgently. There is nothing we can do. Just stay out of the doctor's way for now. Delilah sagged in his arms, crying helplessly. You know that they will do everything they can. He whispered gently. Delilah didn't reply. She might not even have heard. She just stared in the direction of the emergency room, crying helplessly. The doctors worked for 5 hours, trying to contain the hemorrhages caused by the bullet wounds, 2 in the right lung and 1 in the left lung. Air was being injected through a special device to ensure Ash didn't drown in his own blood. Ironically, he actually owed his life to the clumsy surgical devices attached to his body. The unknown sniper, realizing that their heavy metal structure would act like armor, had used titanium cord armor-piercing bullets. The high-velocity rounds had punched straight through the boy and had embedded themselves into the floor under his bed. If he or she had used the more common hollow-tipped bullets, Ash would already be dead, his chest literally torn apart by the so-called dum-dum effect. Even so, the loss of blood was threatening to cause the loss of the whole battle. The EAM Argent Sea team lost precious minutes while removing the orthopedical braces around the boy's chest. Worse still, there was only more 2 liters of blood type ORH negative available for transfusion. Dr. Andrew Rupertson decided that, to save Ash's life, only the most extreme measures were now possible. Thanks for watching guys. Hope you all are enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a like, share and subscribe. Also don't forget to support author of this fanfic. So let's end this video here. Until then, see you in next video.